time has finally come to talk about that huge Legend of Zelda sorta kinda sequel game everybody's talking about right now. Link Between Worlds. Yeah, the newest 2D Zelda game that's not a direct remake. Sorta kinda. Feels good to be relevant every once in a while. And they say I'm out of touch. Check it out! Link Between Worlds is heavily inspired by Link to the Past. For better or worse. What do you mean? That's your favorite Zelda game, right? Yes, but we'll get there. This game had a rocky development cycle. First, it was supposed to be a Spirit Tracks sequel, but with yet another new gimmick about becoming a moving painting. And then the project became a victim of dizzying mismanagement, with most of the original development team being assigned to other projects, like Skyward Sword. As if that did that game any favors. Just watch the review, shameless plug. And finally, Miyamoto decides that the new team should now base the game off of Link to the Past, without cutting any of the conflicting concepts from the original prototype. I'd like to think he meant base the game off what worked well in Link to the Past, and not literally just take Link to the Past map and slap it onto this one. Yeah, I've got serious problems with this game. Great, yet another popular game that everybody in the world seems to like other than you. This is unironically one of the worst Zelda games ever made. Holy, what about the CDI games? Those games are hysterical. This one's an even worse kind of bad. Mediocre. Oh boy, okay, honestly, if you've never played Link to the Past before, you'll probably really like Link Between Worlds. Yeah, you won't even realize how often it drops a load on Link to the Past and treats it like its own toilet paper. Yes, it reuses Link to the Past's map, like verbatim. And sure, this is annoying, but at least there's new stuff hidden all over Hyrule, like tons of those little shell thingies from Link's Awakening. The problem is you can't just recycle old content and expect it to work with new puzzles and gimmicks. The game is constantly at odds with trying to faithfully recreate Link to the Past, while at the same time integrating new puzzles and painting gimmicks. So the painting gimmick he hates so much is called wall merging. Hey, I don't hate it, I'm just arguing that it has no place being forcefully shoved into Link to the Past. Wall merging is a new magic ability allowing Link to cling to walls and other flat surfaces and move along them like a two-dimensional painting, and it's actually pretty cool. You get to solve a bunch of new clever puzzles where you need to slip through cracks and around otherwise impossible obstacles this way. Problem comes with it being mandatory all over the map and throughout many of the dungeons throughout the game, to the extent that it gets tiring how much Nintendo wants to milk this gimmick for all it's worth, and all on the Link to the Past map for absolutely no reason. Yeah, I think you mentioned that already. Either remake a game or don't! It's funny how you're so mad at this game already, and we haven't even gotten to the actual controversial feature. Yeah, the Link to the Past disrespect around every turn is one thing, but the item renting system has to be the most catastrophically moronic idea ever conceived for a Zelda game. So anyway, the item renting system— I hate this! You've gotta let me describe it first. So you can pay rupees to rent basically any item or upgrade you'd imagine to be in the game at the get-go from this greedy little rabbit man Ravio. If Link dies at any point after renting an item, it'll be automatically returned to the shop, forcing him to backtrack and repurchase it. You can, however, buy the items outright, but it'll cost you quite a lot more rupees to do so. I hate this. At least you waited. There are so many things wrong with this system, I don't even know where to begin. How about I give you a hand, because honestly I don't like it much either. It's like they took all the pieces of the game and then just like threw it in one place and said, here, you pick it up. So you're telling me that the developers honestly intended for players to grind rupees to gather their equipment instead of, you know, play the game to earn them? It sure sucks taking away the joy of discovering new tools and items in dungeons, caves, and other hideaways across the map from the player with absolutely no discernible upside. Like, what do we gain from losing our items upon death? How about the fact that we just absolutely destroyed Link to the Past by completely removing its Metroidvania item discovery system? Just imagine if Nintendo released a Super Metroid remake today, and Samus now starts with all of her upgrades at once in the ship, but first she's gotta shoot hundreds of screens and zoomers in order to buy back all of her crap first. They not only robbed us of the fun of the game, but they just totally sabotaged the entire deliberate structure of the game's design in the process. It also doesn't help that this is probably the easiest Zelda game I have ever played. The designers were clearly worried about players dying and losing all their items and rupees spent to acquire them, so the whole game has more cash packed in it than Luigi's Mansion to compensate. By the time I beat the game, I had acquired over 15,000 rupees, but the game hadn't even killed me once, defeating the entire point of the rental system. And then it had the audacity to showcase my empty death count in a 5-digit text box, as if it were proudly Dark Souls or Super Meat Boy or something. But hey, it's still a new 2D Zelda game, and those are always fun, where, you know, you explore an open action-adventure world challenging dungeons and bosses to save the kingdom. Probably should have mentioned that earlier. Also, this game's disgustingly broken and pisses in Link to the Past mouth until end credits. Yeah, well, there's that too. Okay, you gotta admit, this looks pretty good for a 2D Zelda. The 3D effect is also pretty cool for whoever actually uses that feature. The game was actually designed to look so much like Link to the Past that they actually had to weirdly distort all of the graphics to face up at the camera in order to get the same top-down look that the original pulled off in sprite form. Thing is, this doesn't actually make any sense if you look at it from the side, where you can see just how janky the game world really is for the sake of this illusion. I think that's actually really neat. It's got some pretty nice designs all around too. Link and Zelda both have these modern versions of their original artwork, and I really like that. Zelda in particular still uses this game's design for Super Smash Bros. Ultimate, by the way. The 2D painting effects actually look really cool and stylized. Shame they kind of conflict with the art style, reflecting the DS Wind Waker spin-off sequel games and not the new established style, but chalk it up to the development hell that this game went through, I guess. You know what, I take it back. Everything looks great except Yuga, who looks freaking stupid. Am I allowed to complain about how they butchered the story yet? It is not that hold on. Alright, fire away, sourpuss. Alright, so in the same vein of this game not knowing what it wants to be, it doesn't even understand what story to tell, as in it's half an awkward retelling of Link to the Past and half an entirely new thing. Yeah, apparently as far as Nintendo is concerned, this is not a remake or retelling of Link to the Past in any way. It's just coincidental to the point of becoming an insensitive parody where they were probably just naming it nostalgia. And this baloney was actually intended to fit inside Nintendo's laughably bad official timeline, which you can hear all about in our episode discussing the timeline travesty. Shameless plug. I want to explain the story, but I don't want to retread all the Link to the Past stuff we already went over. You can also just go watch our Link to the Past review to hear exactly what this game's catastrophically ruining. Shameless plug. Okay, so assuming you know Link to the Past already, basically swap out Aghanim with Yuga, a goofy dreadlocks clown whose entire personality boils down to obsessing over the new painting gimmick, and you already know half the story. And the rest is more like an addendum and less like new material, outside of the game's one real change coming in the form of changing the name of the Dark World to Lorule. We now have Hyrule and Lorule. Aside from that being the most painfully corny thing I think I've ever heard in my entire life, this adds absolutely nothing to the plot aside from some added convolution of Lorule counterpart characters to Hyruleans, namely Zelda and her counterpart, Hilda. It really is just an unabashedly bootleg Dark World, and if you're wondering about Link's counterpart from Lorule, don't, because there's only one character in the entire freaking game besides Yuga who it could possibly be. So of course it's Ravio, the item monopolizing bunny scam artist. Hey, it's kinda neat that Link's Dark World, Lorule counterpart takes the form of a bunny just like Link did in Link to the Past. But that's just it. References and pandering mean nothing when the story itself doesn't know what it wants to be. Is it a retelling or a sequel? It's neither! Nintendo even said as much! What even is this game? Trash! Okay, I hate to say this because most of the Link to the Past arrangements are wonderful, but these new tracks stink worse than Hamster's trash can right now. Sorry, Lorule was too much. It also doesn't help that 90% of the soundtrack is a bunch of shamelessly recycled melodies from past Zelda games, even the 3D ones like Ocarina of Time. It felt weird when Minish Cap did it, and it's equally uncomfortable here too, though I admittedly might be the only person alive who thinks this way. Yoga, 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 yoga. Come on, we can't throw out the entire soundtrack just because of one bad egg. Yoga, 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 yoga. I take it back, the soundtrack sucks. Yoga, 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 yoga. I implore you to just play Link to the Past instead. Never assume that just because a game is newer or even considered to be a remake, that does not mean it will be better. You remember Super Mario 64 DS? It's a faithful remake of the N64 classic, but it added a ton of new content and ideas, like swapping characters with different abilities. However, unlike Link Between Worlds, these additions fit perfectly into the game considering they were all either based on or closely inspired by existing content in the original. Yeah, but here the new stuff just gets in the way of the source material, or outright defeats its purpose. At least the next time Nintendo decided to remake a 2D Zelda game, they'd actually do it and not just give us another half-baked sham like this one. Unfortunately, they haven't given us a truly original 2D Zelda game since 2009. I don't think this qualified as selling it. A fan actually sent me this game to play, knowing how much I loved Link to the Past, and I still feel cheated. The positive gamer in me actually enjoyed The Legend of Zelda: Link Between Worlds a lot more than you would think with this video, with a 6 out of 10. You gotta keep in mind that aside from all that garbage packed into this game, the rest is still a high-quality 2D Zelda game, and I think that's at least worth an above-average score, even if it's just barely accomplishing it. The critical gamer in me cannot forgive this pitiful excuse of a Zelda game for making such horrendous crimes against game design with a 3 out of 10. Proving that Nintendo has absolutely no idea why Link to the Past was so good to begin with, or how to even begin to replicate its charm or success. So what do you think? Let us know how your positive and critical sides rate Legend of Zelda Link Between Worlds in the comments below. But if you think this means that 2D Zelda games aren't worth making anymore, then you're just playing with yourself. How is it already 2023 and we still don't have any word on a new 3D Mario game? Hey, if Mario Odyssey taught us anything, it's that Nintendo absolutely can't be topped when it comes to 3D platformers, so I'm sure it'll be worth the wait. As if anybody else is even making 3D platformers anymore. And I thought 3D Mario wrote itself into a hole before Odyssey. He had this big debut in 64, took a vacation, and even went to space. Nothing spells doom for a franchise more than going to space. Could it even be possible for Mario to outdo all of his past adventures? If movie sequels have taught me anything, that'll be a hard no. We haven't even reviewed Galaxy or 64 yet, but I assure you Odyssey might just top them both. Here we go. Oh, whoa, look at how amazing it all looks. Not really liking these stupid rabbit things. Oh, this huge, open 3D level design is fantastic. Oh man, the rabbits came back. And that soundtrack. Come on, I thought I already killed these rabbits like 5 worlds ago. Don't you just think this has to be the best 3D Mario has ever been? Yes. Forget about the stupid bunnies. They even came back in a secret final boss gauntlet. I swear there is no pleasing you. So what do you do with Mario after Flood and the gravity physics of his past adventures to keep the game interesting? You forget all of that and just focus on open 3D platforming fun. Well, there is a new gimmick with the capture mechanic, allowing Mario to temporarily possess all sorts of enemies and objects in order to temporarily utilize their abilities. But the constant flow of new things to possess all over each of the game's kingdoms allow for the 3D platforming to be explored to its fullest. It genuinely plays like a massive sandbox 3D platformer, allowing you the freedom to play it all the way you want. I'm just saying, we all know this game only happened because of the capture mechanic, considering Nintendo's insistence on gimmicks in each of their sequels, as if people wouldn't buy the new Mario game without it. Luckily, the capture mechanic comes off as a fun, creative thing you can do that enhances the world instead of detracting from it, you know, like most of Nintendo's dumb gimmicks. Thank God. Just like in 64, Sunshine, and Galaxy, Mario has open access to a wide variety of 3D worlds with tons of stars to collect, or rather moons in this case, but instead of being booted out of the world each time he finds one, he just keeps on going until he wants to leave. This little change adds so much more enjoyability and freedom to the world that Mario has yet to achieve. Sucks it took him so long, considering a certain Baron Bird had already done this back in 1998. Who cares? It happened. And because of that, Mario can now find a whopping 830 moons hidden absolutely everywhere, and your progression in the story is only tied to your finding a set number of them, aside from defeating a few bosses along the way. So how you progress and what moons you stumble upon are completely up to your own playstyle. I really appreciate that this time it's just about the joy of discovering secrets and having fun with the new creative level design, and isn't forcing us to adapt to new gameplay shifting concepts like Flood. Unlike Sunshine and Galaxy, which each have their great and sour moments, Odyssey is always playing to its strengths, and every moment feels like its new best. Even Cappy, your new sentient eyeball hat possessing your enemies, adds an extra layer of versatility to Mario, making all sorts of tricky jumps possible just by tossing your hat. The more you play around with Cappy, the more you realize just how fun it is just to control Mario. Yeah, this might be the best 3D Mario has ever been. It's been 6 years now, we can say it. This is the best 3D Mario game. It's nice to see the fat plumber continuing to one-up himself, even though he effectively runs a monopoly on the entire genre. Bless this big, beautiful ball of spaghetti. Okay, I admit, I was weirded out at first by the realistic T-Rex and the people too, but once you play it, the game somehow finds a way to make it all work and still feel like 100% authentic Mario. Can someone please explain the difference to Sonic Team before another realistic human girl wants to fool around at the speed of sound on the cartoon hedgehog's Ken doll crotch? Yes, Sonic 06 was a mistake. Can we please just forget it ever happened? Did you know that Sonic 4 actually happened, and it's way worse than you could possibly imagine? Mario looks amazing, and so do the many colorful and various kingdoms he gets to explore this time. There's even tons of 2D levels taking place on the textures of the 3D levels that you can wrap in and out of, and that's amazing! Yeah, the graphics all around are astounding, except for those stupid rabbits. You can even buy new themed outfits for the meatball based on the world that you found the appropriate amount of purple coins in, and even more so than Breath of the Wild, dressing up this traditionally outfitted character doesn't diminish his character in any way, and it's actually a ton of fun. Man, I hate the look of those rabbits. Oh, what is so bad about the Broodals? They look like they're out of a Sonic game! You know what, you're right. Following in the footsteps of Mario's past absurdity, this game is a big glorious mess, and I love it. So Bowser kidnaps Peach with the intention of marrying her on the moon, but only after assembling the greatest of gifts and preparations for her as possible from each kingdom in the world. Sure, it's kidnapping, but at least he's kinda sweet about it. He's one of those lovable rapists. Peach also has a weird sentient tiara thing like Mario's Cappy for some reason, just so that Mario's new hat is also invested in this rescue. But it's really not about the story. It's all about the crazy set pieces along the way, like fighting a giant goofy chicken in a massive pot of colorful stew, racing through the Tundra Olympics as a bouncy overweight seal, and even defeating a medieval dark fantasy dragon. Nobody's gonna care if we talk about story spoilers in a Mario game, right? Like he said, we're like 6 years late to this party, so you had your chance to play it. Good, because I want to talk about my favorite moments from the entire game, namely the festival in New Donk City, an entire urban kingdom dedicated to Mario's origins in the arcade, and after assembling a jazzy band, playing a supremely reimagined NES melody for the mayor Pauline, and yes, that Pauline from the original games, she invites Mario to participate in the city's festival as thanks. Now, coming from a guy whose first ever video game was Super Mario Bros., this little red jumping guy has a special place in my heart, but I swear nothing could have emotionally prepared me for this festival. Pauline actually performs this new vocal track, Jump Up Superstar, that's absolutely overflowing with nostalgic love for this character who's been on top of the video game world for over 40 years. It's the most endearing celebratory song that genuinely makes me tear up with joy.
It's all based on this one game that started all this. Oh my gosh, it's so cool. Oh my god! Oh my god, this is awesome! Oh my god, this is great. Oh god! Oh, it's like Donkey Kong. Oh my gosh, I'm playing Donkey Kong. This is so cool. Oh my god. Oh my god, this is so cool. Oh my gosh. I'm like speechless. This is so awesome. Hey, there we go. Whoa! Oh, I'm trying to hear the words too. This is so good. Oh my gosh, this is so awesome. Oh my god, this is great. Oh my gosh, there's like so much history going up to this point too. I'm like trying to admire just all of that. Whoa! Hey! Oh my god, was that Donkey? Oh my god, it's I'm like, oh my god! It's the original Donkey Kong level. Oh my gosh, this is so cool. DK. Oh my gosh, this is so awesome. Oh my god, I wonder how many people like fully, like totally appreciate this. Who've like played from this long. Oh my gosh. Go! Go! Get him! Oh! Yes! Oh, it's so cool! I feel like I'm 6. I don't even have any commentary. That was just awesome. We couldn't have done it without your help. Oh, it's like it's on so many levels. That's so nice. Oh, it's so cool.
And wow, look at that! The whole thing was recorded in a Let's Play series that you can all totally go watch now, shameless plug. And I thought that was a trip, but the ending is equally fantastic. As Mario crashes the wedding, he defeats Bowser, and as the moon caverns crumble all around him and Peach, he's only left with one possibility of escape.
What are we gonna do? Oh yeah, buddy!
You actually see Bowser's memories through all of their past battles before controlling him outright to slash and burn your way to safety while yet another new vocal song, Break Free, Lead the Way, plays. Now, maybe it's just me and my long history with this little red guy and his spiky turtle, but this surprise final level was equally exhilarating and breathtaking. And at the end, it looks like Mario's actually gonna propose to Peach, but in the end, he and Bowser get into this silly fight resulting in the princess turning them both down. Of course, because Nintendo would never actually do that, but gosh, if they were ever gonna do it, this would have been the time. This game was perfect. And yes, of course, the big marinara man marrying his fungus princess would have made me cry. Shut up, you probably would have too if these characters have been with you for as long as you could remember. I wouldn't say perfect, because the Brutals still exist. Can't we just enjoy a game? I object! Okay, as we clearly couldn't contain ourselves earlier, this soundtrack is absolutely magnificent. Not only that, but the actual sound mixing is extremely well polished, and sound effects and music are wonderful, yes, but I really love the extra care and attention it makes to get your music to start and stop at perfect moments like this. Like, how do you do that when it led organically from live gameplay not even a minute beforehand? I genuinely have no idea how these wizards managed to do this, but it is awesome. And I'll say it again, the vocal tracks are both so incredible, they elevate the game in such a big way that I can't imagine this game without them. And the rest of the game's composers were all at the top of their game, making multiple versions of each kingdom's tracks for above ground, caves, underwater, and even the retro 8-bit style versions for when you dive into a 2D segment. And even my man Koji Kondo is still making new music for Mario. Wow, we had like 0 complaints with this game. You know what this means, Hamster? I hate those rabbits. You never disappoint, do you? Now take this from a guy who loves both of these series equally. Legend of Zelda Breath of the Wild was good and all, but when it comes to the best game of 2017, you simply cannot beat Super Mario Odyssey. If the uninterrupted open 3D kingdoms with over 800 freaking moons thing didn't entice you, this post-game actually has an amazing gauntlet level called the Darker Side, which might just be the most challenging and most satisfying Mario level I have ever played, and all just for your final moon. Oh, it starts with the characters from all of the kingdoms coming together to cheer you on, and features this crazy long rush of platforming challenges and even mini-bosses, all before this final climb up a skyscraper where you and Cappy get to reflect on your amazing journey together and say your goodbyes. It's just Mario saying goodbye to his hat. Calm down. This game makes me so happy I want to cry. The positive gamer in me, of course, lets Super Mario Odyssey capture a 6 out of 10. Yeah, of course not. It's a 10 out of 10, easily. This is the best 3D Mario game, as well as one of the, if not the, best 3D platformer ever made. And I want some more, Nintendo. Come on, cough it up. The critical gamer in me can't get over the Brutals enough to give Super Mario Odyssey anything higher than a 5 out of 10, considering they're in what feels like half the game. Yeah, of course I'm kidding. It's a 10 out of 10. This game is about as close to perfect as I've ever experienced, and what good is a 10 if not for damn near perfection? But what do you think? Let us know how your positive and critical sides rate Super Mario Odyssey in the comments below. But if you don't think 3D platformers are worth making anymore, even after playing this, then you're just playing with yourself. Alright, Hamster, guess what? We actually get to review the newest Final Fantasy game. 16? Of course not. No, I'm talking about Crisis Core Reunion. That's just a remaster of a 2007 PSP game. Plus, it came out in December of last year. It's still the newest Final Fantasy. Why would you even say it like that? I never get to be relevant. You do realize the industry tends to consider games even a month old to be outdated? But it just came out! Welcome to our retro review channel. Stop stalling, you're gonna make this video even more outdated. Ladies and gentlemen, today we will be excavating a video game originally released for the Sony PSP, otherwise known as the Precambrian Superannuated Player. If I can remember it, then it's not old. Those are the rules. I'm gonna warn you up front. There is no discussing Crisis Core without spoiling a large part of Final Fantasy VII. I'd say either play it yourself or watch our review of the remake, shameless plug, but that's only part 1 and it doesn't cover up to the big plot twist thing that Crisis Core assumes you know, and the rest of the story isn't even out yet, so either hunt down the original or accept the spoilers. Or get lost. Yeah, basically. We're gonna do our best to keep it tame, but you've been warned. Anyway, I didn't really care much for Crisis Core. What? Hey, it's cool enough seeing more from the world of Final Fantasy VII, considering Square apparently believes that it's a series in and of itself with all the spin-offs and attention it's gotten over the years. Gameplay's kinda wonky and the story is an absolute train wreck. To be fair, I liked it, but yeah, it feels kinda weird putting up a spoiler warning for one of the worst written stories in the medium. And he's the positive gamer, so you know we're in for a doozy this time. He calls me old and then unironically says doozy. Can we hurry this up so I can get back to reviewing NES games? Yes, dear. So Crisis Core is an action RPG originally released for the PSP in 2008 in the West and 2007 in Japan. Now, if you can remember all the way back to December of 2022, a spruced up remaster was released for modern platforms, further subtitled Reunion. The game was re-released to help fill the gap between Final Fantasy VII Remake installments and modernize its look and feel to match those games, which it does surprisingly well on the Nintendo Switch. Now they did add a lot of welcome stuff like better camera control and a new battle stance for the Buster Sword, but most of the work went into the visuals considering the original, you know, looked like a PSP game. Yeah, something like that. So forget everything you know and expect from a Final Fantasy game, and instead prepare for short bursts of mission-based action combat akin to Monster Hunter Freedom Unite or Metal Gear Peace Walker. Why did so many PSP games ditch their old formulas in favor of this new mission format? Did they honestly think people would exclusively play it only in short bursts? It's not like Nintendo hadn't been proving the market was there for full-blown portable games for over a decade or anything. Regardless, you do get some spillover from base Final Fantasy VII, like materia and accessories and summons, but the real selling point of the game was taking it into the realm of action-based combat and away from the ATB system. Even though you technically still have turns, they just come really fast and might as well not even be there. However, just like Nintendo, they decided to add a huge gimmick to the gameplay that we would never see again, the DMW, or the Digital Mind Wave. I'm honestly shocked they left this in the remaster, considering how stupid this idea is in practice. So randomly in combat, and I do mean randomly, Zack's magical brain roulette wheel will start to spin, and if it lands on 3 of the same character or summon, he will get some extra powerful attack or effect relating to them. Now this doesn't sound like it's a big deal, but when your survival in a battle comes down to sheer dumb luck, it can get pretty frustrating. Sometimes you'll absolutely slaughter enemies and bosses with OP attacks and buffs constantly, and others you'll slam your head against a wall attempt after attempt just because your stupid brain slots won't land on anything useful. You could be performing perfectly with great attacks and dodges, but if those ridiculous slots don't land, then you're out of luck. And the remaster, get this, gives you the courtesy of choosing when to activate this super powerful attack, heal, or summon, since the original just unleashed it immediately, not giving you the chance to strategize in any way. The slots even determine when you level up. You do have a hidden XP meter, but all it does is just increase your chance of leveling up. What absolute Nimrod thought that was a good idea! Probably one of those hopelessly addicted elderly folks glued to the penny slots. But aside from all that crap, the gameplay's actually pretty fun, all things considered. Shinra Electric Power Company would like to extend a friendly reminder that gambling is a proven psychologically addictive, self-destructive action manipulated by wealthy corporations taking advantage of your poor mathematics education. Please play responsibly. Most remasters nowadays are almost entirely about graphics, and luckily enough, Crisis Core Reunion recreated a large amount of the game's visuals to be on par with the FF7 Remake series, and it actually works really well. Odd how these graphics seem to run fine on Switch, but the PS4 coughed and wheezed in FF7 Remake if Cloud so much as looked at a door. Luckily, there is no weird pop-in, torn textures, or pixelated skyboxes. It seems simple to say, but I'm sure this was a massive undertaking bringing this outdated PSP game into the modern era, matching a new series aesthetic, and getting it to run smoothly on all modern platforms. Though, the menus and UI still trip me up with odd placement and structure. Okay, yeah, the menus were so screwy, I actually neglected optimizing Zack for most of the game just to avoid using them. And if you're wondering about the original PSP game, it looks like a PSP game, but with expensive-looking CG cutscenes filling out that UMD that you're forced to watch between every successful roulette wheel spin. Gotta sell Advent Children somehow. We already did the spoiler warning earlier, but I still feel inclined to mention, even though this game is a prequel to Final Fantasy VII, does not mean that you should play it before the main game. And from this point on, we're just gonna assume that you already know what we're talking about, or just don't care. So the purpose of Crisis Core is to add context to Zack, Cloud, and Sephiroth before the events of Final Fantasy VII begin, through lots of padding and a new villain who doesn't actually matter in the grand scheme of things. And lots of fan service! Like, so much that it actually hurts the story. It's constantly referencing the main game, which, might I remind you, hasn't happened yet in continuity, and repeatedly comes off as awkward or confusing, rather than exciting callbacks, or call forwards? I don't get excited or nostalgic seeing Zack ride the train in the opening bombing mission, or fall through the roof of the church landing in the exact same flower bed Cloud will later, right next to Aerith, again. I feel like the writers genuinely couldn't come up with a single original thought to fill all this padding instead of lazy pandering. So this is one of those stories that'll absolutely hinge on you already being invested in the world and characters of Final Fantasy VII, aside from all of the shameless callbacks. Because the droning, corny dialogue certainly wouldn't hold any other sane human being for 15 hours. The story follows Zack Fair becoming a first-class soldier for Shinra, working alongside Sephiroth and his partner/mentor Angeal. Long story short, new villain Genesis breaks away from Soldier and the group hunts him down. Angeal and eventually Sephiroth also break away from Soldier due to them all realizing that Shinra had experimented on them with Genova cells, and because of this are now decaying at the molecular level. Outside of all the characters and exposition that's just packed in here just for the fans to go, oh, it's Aerith and Sung! The actual plot is just a simple excuse to add context to the base game scenes that needed no context. Likewise, Zack and Sephiroth headed to Nibelheim to research Shinra's sinister plan and basically burn the place down. Even NPC side quests are forcefully referencing and squeezing Zack into the base game as intrusively as Lion King 1.5 to its source material. Like this random dude who you help gather wood to build a bar in the slums of Midgar, which he lets Zack name, so of course it's Seventh Heaven. Like, what did this add to the story? You're just forcefully tying in every little redundant thing to Zack instead of actually writing a real story about the guy. That same guy has this hilarious line afterward about him sharing his wood with you, and it made me giggle, so there, it was justified. I suspect this game was only written just so the original's famous scenes would get redone with better graphics. No kidding, especially when the only original content comes in the form of disappointingly shallow new characters. Can't just say that, we've gotta back it up. Nah, I could just ignore all the context and quote a non-existent play for the remainder of this video instead. So Genesis is just Sephiroth again, but before Sephiroth, and seems to only speak in Loveless quotes, a play that you never actually see, only referenced in the background of the original's opening, and luckily we never see it because these quotes are all so unbelievably corny and overly dramatized that they always had me like,
shut up!
All that awaits you
I'm
is a
warning you!
somber morrow.
Angeal, however, might even be worse, only existing to pass down the Buster Sword to Zack. Whenever he has something to say, it's either way too much information about something that doesn't matter, or way too little on what does, or how important his honor is to him, even though he straight up betrays his friends and murders his own innocent mother.
What the hell did you do, Angeal? Is that your idea of honor?
So yeah, it's a cringy Kingdom Hearts level crime against writing. Genesis is a crappy villain recycled from Dirge of Cerberus who only diminishes what little story we got. Angeal is an unrelatable hypocrite with the face of a washboard, and the story in general only exists to add unnecessary context to a game that didn't even need it. But nah, that's it. A lot of work was actually done in this regard for the remaster as well, with all new voices and music composed for the game just for the sake of consistency with FF7 Remake. Yeah, that's nice and all, but everything came to a screeching halt for me, all because of one instance near the end of the game. So I'm facing the final boss underprepared, and the battle music plays one time through during this long fight, and then just stops. And I had to play out the remainder of the fight in complete silence with nothing but sound effects for like 5 to 10 minutes. Now, I haven't seen a single person encounter this problem online, so either you got a 1 in a million glitch where your music couldn't loop, or you suck so bad at the game it didn't expect you to be fighting that long and nobody else ever encountered this problem. I fought a final boss for what felt like ages with nothing but the sounds of clanging metal and squeaky tennis shoes.
Yeah, that kinda sucks.
It was the funniest thing ever! I know that all sounded bad, but I swear, this game is actually still pretty good. It even totally justifies the DMW in its final scene, where Zack has to battle a hopelessly huge army of mooks until his death. The DMW doesn't spin normally to show his mental duress, but instead is completely fixated on Aerith. It's the only time where this mechanic is successfully utilized to see into the mind of a man who knows he's about to die. I don't know, it didn't really work on me, considering the only time I remember ever seeing the two do things together was building a flower wagon and buying a ribbon. Not actual character development, just pointless backstories to establish where Aerith got her ribbon and flower wagon. And I want to say that Zack's inevitable death scene was as powerful as it felt in the original, but it's paired up with this contrasting goofy music as he floats into the sky after Angeal wishing for his wings. You know, because players are too dumb to pick on all this intense subtlety. His name was Angeal, for crying out loud. This game is so corny, it'll give you indigestion. That was so terrible, it might just be the best way to describe it. The positive gamer in me had a good enough time with Crisis Core Reunion to rank it with a 6 out of 10. It's lucky it's a fun enough gameplay appetizer for Final Fantasy VII Rebirth, because this mess of a story almost soiled the very game it sought out to idolize. The critical gamer in me found Crisis Core Reunion to be a disappointing 4 out of 10. I can't even say it's average when the very core of this game is in crisis. What? As if that stupid title even means anything. But what do you think? Let us know how your positive and critical sides rate. Let me get this right here. Crisis Core trademark Final Fantasy registered 7-Reunion in the comments below. How about you? Me? You're just playing with yourself. It doesn't even make any sense! Gone Gaga. I'm hearing some big things about that new Final Fantasy XVI demo. Yeah, it's really pushing boundaries for how much content can be given out for free. Demos are cool. It's effectively the best marketing you can do. Shame a PS5 is still as rare and pricey as finding quality content on Netflix. It's funny though, it does remind me of the best demo I have ever played. The original DS pack-in cartridge, Metroid Prime Hunter's First Hunt. Oh yeah, that was so much fun to play on release day. It showed off some amazing pre-rendered cutscenes and had some great 3D gameplay for the DS. On day one. But what did that matter when the actual game didn't release alongside it? Or in the next few months. Or even the next year. Metroid Prime Hunters took 2 agonizingly long years to finally release, long after everyone forgot about that disposable pack-in demo. 2 years! And to make matters worse, it came out with little to no announcements or fanfare. I'm convinced Nintendo is self-sabotaging their own Metroid marketing. Why is nobody buying my Metroid games? This demo was amazing! And once the main game finally rolled around, it was just meh. But come on, it's a full 3D Metroid Prime spin-off game for the DS! Not even the 3DS. This thing is pushing the original hardware to its limit. By the time it came out, the people who remembered it were already anticipating the imminent release of Prime 3 because nobody so much as heard about Prime Hunters until long after it released, and they stumbled across it rotting in the bargain bin. I'm a little annoyed by this. As good as this demo is, releasing it at launch was probably a mistake. When it comes to marketing Metroid, mistake is Nintendo's middle name. Nintendo mistake though? Can we please just talk about the game now? I know you love money, Nintendo, so why you gotta be so against selling your own games? We get it! How are you so greedy and stupid? Not to bring this up again, I swear they're different. The demo First Hunt had a multiplayer mode and 3 short single-player campaign missions, my favorite of which being survival mode, something we've never seen before in the series, and as of now, we've never seen since, including in the full Prime Hunters release itself. Unfortunately, the only aspect of the demo that made it into the full game was the absolute disaster of the control options. There are 5 control schemes. Well, technically 3, but 2 have left and right-handed options, so I guess 5 if you're ambidextrous. You know something's wrong with your game when you have 5 control schemes. I can confidently say that not a single one of these plays or feels right. Each one feels awkward for different reasons, utilizing the touchscreen as part of your controller and not as, you know, another screen. So once you decide on a control scheme that feels the least awful with minimal carpal tunnel, you can get into the actual campaign or multiplayer if you manage to find another human being who bought this game much less realize it even existed. I hate to say this, but this is probably the weakest Metroid game I've ever played. The campaign does gameplay similarly to the mainline Primes, however without most of the cool items and upgrades you find along the way. Isn't that the part that's supposed to make it a Metroid game? Yes, but instead we get new weapons that kinda sorta act like your old upgrades, unlocking more of the maps. And that's another thing. We have multiple planets with their own maps for the first time. Now, most of these maps are pretty linear and they aren't nearly as involved as any of the ones you're used to, but at least it adds long loading screens between moving from one map to another. Fair, but honestly, all I remember with the gameplay was frustrating controls, uninteresting linear design, and lots of one-on-one bounty hunter mini-bosses akin to generic first-person shooters and not at all like Metroid. You know, there's not even traditional boss monsters outside of 2 or 3 robotic shoot-the-big glowy target sequences. Do you actually hate a Metroid game? The demo survival mode is really fun! Why'd they make a demo when the main game was nothing like it? By modern standards, this game looks absolutely hideous, but at the time I swear these multi-screen pre-rendered cutscenes were undeniably the best on the market. It was really good at playing those MP4s. Coming from the Game Boy Advance, this really showcased the power of the DS by comparison. And the actual gameplay was impressive enough to, you know, actually function. Yeah, the design quality was hit or miss, but I gotta agree, for a DS title, it's quite impressive graphically. Also, it's a Prime spin-off, so it technically stole all of its aesthetics from the GameCube. Looks passable enough for copying someone else's homework. Bear with us here, this is about to get stupid. So Prime Hunters is set between Prime 1 and Prime 2 for some reason, and honestly it doesn't even really matter, and prepare for a lot of bizarre plot decisions from Nintendo STC, the pinch hitter dev team, as Retro is hard at work making Prime 3. So if this sounds like a plot from someone who has absolutely no idea what a Metroid game is, then keep in mind that's basically true. So out in the middle of galactic butt-sucking nowhere, a telepathic message beams out into everyone's brains claiming that, quote, "The secret to ultimate power lies in the Olympic cluster." Which, in case you're wondering, yes, that's just totally made up spacey-wacy words and not a real place in Metroid or real life. And also the most obvious trap ever. I mean, what kind of sad parasitic bottom feeder of a life form would actually fall for something so blatantly dumb? So the Galactic Federation thinks this is definitely real. Of course it was the government. And Samus Aran is tasked with hunting down whatever the heck this supposed ultimate power is and bringing it safely to them for money. I'd say they at least got the bounty hunter part right, but there's also a random crew of actual bounty hunters who also believe this telepathic snake oil salesman without question, and all decide to kill each other over whatever awaits them at the end of this cosmic Easter egg hunt. Now you do get to scan log entries to learn about the extinct Olympic race, similar to how it worked in Prime, to add some extra lore to this silly fetch quest, so I guess that's a welcome addition. The story is mostly tying together your interactions, or well, fights with these other hunters over the artifacts needed to open the next door in this series of goofy space escape rooms. And I don't mean they argue their morals and ideals before clashing, I mean they just shoot you on sight. The only story you get out of these clowns is from the manual, unless you count that wordless intro cutscene that basically tells you nothing but their names. So obviously not a single one of them matters in the story. Like, not even a little. Though one of them is a silicon-based life form, and that's at least a neat little tidbit of lore that never gets fleshed out or goes anywhere. See, look, I was serious. They only exist to provide easy-to-program boss fights and let Samus take their weapons, the most annoying of which is Psylux, who fires a constant stream of lightning that auto-targets you and constantly drains your HP as he fires and backs away and dodges your shots, healing him the entire time. It doesn't help that we're playing with a freaking touchscreen trying to aim and fire at this jerk who's packing a no-effort I win gun, and the manual has the audacity to call this spammer a talented sharpshooter. So eventually, after enough of that, everyone seems to find the source of the message all at once, a lost prison ship called the Oubliette, hidden away in another dimension, holding the dangerous Goria, responsible for broadcasting the brain message, hoping to lure enough strong, gullible idiots to its location and involuntarily free it from its prison. It was a trap! So after Samus plays a few rounds of the Simon Says color game with it, she acquires the Omega Cannon, a weapon so powerful it's the only thing capable of harming Goria. So she blows the crap out of that guy alongside the entire ship, because of course she does, and that's it. She just kind of goes home. Wait, so there actually was an ultimate weapon, and it happened to be the only thing that the imprisoned message sender was weak to? Yes. And it never thought to use it for itself to blow up the ship and escape. You know, considering it clearly was strong enough to do so because it only works for Samus's suit. But hold on, it wasn't made by the Chozo, was it? Nope. What even is this story? Did Samus even get paid for this? Not that we know of. Wow, even in space, contract workers are getting cheated based on technicalities. Wait, but doesn't she have an ultimate gun now? Yeah, no. Why? I don't know, she probably lost it at the beginning of Prime 2 anyway. This is so dumb! You know, I liked the story better in the demo. Me too, there wasn't one. Well, it's got this uncomfortable DS twangy speaker thing going on, but it's still kind of a Prime soundtrack, just, you know, not at all made by the same people and kind of sounding a bit underwhelming. Yeah, I can't really forgive all the droning monotonous tracks for when you're just exploring and not in combat. The base Prime games do an amazing job all around for music and combat and exploration, but this game only shines in the former a little. How else can I say this other than all the good tracks sound like rip-offs of the Prime soundtrack and all the new stuff sounds like a loop of the same 6 muddy notes continuously. I had to be really careful with the songs I chose to play in the background this time, so you didn't just think I had a really loud AC unit running in the room instead of an actual soundtrack. Call me crazy, but I think I liked the demo even better. Me too! Now, this is gonna sound crazy, but this game was actually Nintendo's attempt to compete with Halo and draw in a new audience from the series. Setting aside how obviously fruitless that was, my point here is that this game wasn't designed to be a quality single-player experience, but instead hinged on its multiplayer to try and create a Halo for Nintendo. Look at this dinky little snippet on the back of the box talking about the single-player campaign shoved in the bottom right corner like it's a total afterthought. I can cover the whole thing up with my finger. This game was mostly a marketing experiment by Nintendo that failed pretty hard. You gotta be seriously out of touch with Metroid to think that people liked the Prime series because it had shooting in first person. Even if you call those games first-person shooters, you're totally missing the point. At least with the multiplayer, you and your opponent are on equal playing fields trying to constantly strafe and fire ping pong balls back at each other with the worst set of controls known to the genre. That may not be fun, but at least it's fair. Should have played the real DS Prime spin-off instead. The positive gamer in me is having trouble expressing my deep disappointment for Metroid Prime Hunters, settling with a 3 out of 10. The demo was really cool. It made the long wait for the game seem unbearable until it was inevitably forgotten. And by the time I finally got around to give the main game a whirl, I ended up wishing I hadn't. The critical gamer in me has to admit that Metroid Prime Hunters is at least a 4 out of 10. Every aspect of this game is objectively inferior to the main series, but considering all it's setting out to accomplish on the original DS, I can't help but feel at least marginally impressed. So what do you think? Let us know how your positive and critical sides rate Metroid Prime Hunters, and more importantly the demo, in the comments below. And with that, I'm gonna broadcast a little brain blast to you. Then you're just playing with yourself. It's a trap! No, I've never pooped in the sink. Oh, we're live. It only makes sense to review Super Mario RPG in light of the new HD remake that just got announced. Remake, right? Remake? I'm lucky! It was hiding in the background all along! Peach is back there too. I know you just can't really see, but... Alright, fine. You know what? Now it's gonna be even more outrageous when Gino isn't playable in the next Smash Brothers. Don't say that! Well, I mean, I sound passionate, but I wouldn't trade the plant we got for the world. So why does everybody make such a big fuss over an old Super Nintendo classic? Super Nintendo games tend to get rated really highly around here, so I'm guessing that was a rhetorical question? Of course, dummy, it's amazing. Before the PlayStation would drive a wedge between Nintendo and Square Enix, the unlikely pair collaborated in a bizarre way that we rarely see in this industry to create a new spin-off title, utilizing Square's RPG talent and Nintendo's ownership of the Mario IP. This game, let's be honest, shouldn't work. Asking the Dragon Quest and Final Fantasy guys to make an RPG in the Mario universe sounds like it should flop hard. But instead it was so successful, it ended up getting its own spin-off series by Nintendo Paper Mario. People complain that Paper Mario has been watered down each entry since the original N64 title, but in truth, even that game is a watered down Mario RPG existing to cut ties with Square Enix and pretend the RPG game never happened while still maintaining its series potential. Luckily, they've both moved past their teenage drama to bring back this unlikely crossover to modern audiences. Oh wait, this was supposed to be the first impressions. I thought it was fun. Oh yeah, it was all like... You control Mario, running and jumping through what appear to be new isometric Mario levels. However, when you encounter an enemy, you'll be flung into turn-based combat with up to 3 party members, utilizing attacks like jumps, fireballs, and Koopa shells to damage your foes. They could have just left it at that, but instead we got this incredibly innovative new mechanic added to make the combat more engaging: timed button presses. Oh, I love this! So instead of just attacking and watching the animation happen, you can actually press A at the right time to get a bonus effect, like an extra jump in a combo, or increase your magic damage. You can also press A at the right moment during the enemy's attacks in order to try and block some incoming damage. And you can even time it with items to get the effect without even consuming anything. It's like a whole mechanic made just for the kids who were holding buttons down in Pokemon thinking would increase their chances of capture. The best part is that the game's not even completely forthcoming about the correct timings and exactly when it even makes a difference, so a lot of the fun is in discovering something new, like getting the hang of new weapons and special attacks. Now, it's still an RPG with towns, shops, equipment, and items and all that stuff, but luckily it's toned way down to be cozy and approachable for a wide audience. I don't even think I ever broke level 25 on any character before beating the game, by the way, and I was so overflowing with healing and MP restoration items by endgame, I ended up tossing most of them and avoiding question mark blocks intentionally. I still found some bosses to be tough until I figured them out. Luckily, the game's less about grinding for strength and more about better strategizing your plan of attack and equipment, as all of your party members are competent but specialize in their own ways. Right, but that's just combat. There's also tons of minigame segments like racing Yoshis, riding minecarts, and jumping across barrels in a river, and playing music for tadpoles, and all sorts of other weird stuff. The game is super strange, but it fits perfectly with the Mario IP, and Square's Final Fantasy traversal minigame segment stuff actually blends in really well to the experience. Square even got a little ahead of themselves and added Culex as a secret boss battle. Technically a new character, but heavily referencing the Final Fantasy series with his sprites, attacks, and music. So wait, is Final Fantasy canon to Mario now? Likely FF4, and why do you even care? It's not like someone's even keeping track of the Mario canon anyway. They also found Link and Samus in this game, so stop! Here's an embarrassing fact. This game looks so good, I honestly thought it was actually an N64 game for years. The detailed sprite work is really nice across the board, making the game actually look 3D, especially with CRT scan lines. I mostly decided on Mario RPG sprites to make a while back just because of how nicely colored these sprites look, and the new HD remaster make lets everyone keep their adorable proportions. Either version looks great. Well, the original did have this ugly chroma key blue void surrounding every area, but the remake Master actually adds some nice new graphics to that void, the indisputable greatest glow-up in video game history. I don't know, now I kinda wanna use it to green screen the background into a live baby panda cam, or a dog with a GoPro, or a YouTube poop compilation of the Super Mario Bros. Super Show. Stop! You journey across the land, gathering party members and artifacts in order to— It's not that generic! But it literally has RPG right there in the title. So a giant sword with eyeballs comes crashing down on Bowser's castle, shattering the Star Road in the process. To reconstruct the Star Road and defeat the new invading villain Smithy, Mario and company set off to collect the 7 stars. Which explains the subtitle, The Legend of the 7 Stars, except not really, because how is it a legend already if it just happened? If the legend existed before then and it's actually a prophecy, but it's made up on the fly, then I guess it's just breaking news. The remixer removes the subtitle so you can forget about the legend. This just in. A massive sword just struck Bowser's Keep, smashing his star-based rainbow bridge in the process. Our experts have confirmed its authenticity due to it having eyeballs. Considering this is all pretty Arthurian, we're gonna hop on the Zelda train and call this the legend. Can I steal your stop? You know, the main story doesn't really matter too much in good RPGs, and instead it's all about its characters. And sure, the cast don't grow very much, but their comical interactions with the world are what really add flavor to the game. game. Yeah, like how Mario is silent but speaks completely in ridiculous transformational charades. Bowser is comically inadequate of a villain and just trying to get back to his house. Peach is a stubborn princess refusing to sit idly by in her castle. Mallow is a long-lost cloud prince who thinks he's a tadpole. And Geno is an imaginative child's toy brought to life by the power of a star. The game's dungeons, if you can even call them that, are just a series of rooms with either challenges or unique gameplay set pieces that range from establishing scenes to downright jokes, and luckily the game is quite funny. The game is not that long as far as most RPGs are concerned, but you wouldn't believe how long it takes Mallow to figure out that he's not a tadpole. He's a precious little dingus. Well, when the game's not directly ripping off old Mario music for cheap nostalgia points. I like cheap nostalgia points. It's actually really great! Oh, I was expecting you to say. Most of the time. I'll take it. Before the remake Master was announced, I'd have felt really bad recommending an inaccessible retro classic like this again, but now with a gorgeous graphical enhancement, it's easy. And if you're a weirdo like me who enjoys the originals, it was actually included on the SNES Classic. Don't go into this one expecting to play for more than 20 hours before you beat the game on your first go around. Like we said before, this is more of a cinematic series of comical and unique set pieces playing like a dumbed down Final Fantasy and less like a full-blown Final Fantasy. But it's Mario! And it's a ton of fun playing this twisted hybrid. Can we get the reverse crossover now that the gang's all back together and chummy again? I want to see a 2D platformer Final Fantasy game with chocobos instead of Yoshis, and bombs instead of bob-ombs, and Behemoth instead of Bowser. I can do this all day. Sorry, Warrior of Light, your crystal is in another dungeon. The positive gamer in me gives Super Mario RPG 7 frog coins out of 10. It's a great game for first-time RPG players, on top of being a funny, charming, cozy, and short game, which the older I get, the more I grow to appreciate. And I know I didn't mention the frog coins, but I swear it's a thing. I just can't spend an hour explaining every little thing in a review like this. I mean, just give me a break. The critical gamer in me, Mario jokes, something something. Super Mario RPG with an 8 out of 10. Mechanically and aesthetically, the game is wonderful at what it's doing, and its greatest fault may just be that there simply isn't enough of it. Well, and the fact that isometric platforming kinda sucks. Did I mention that yet? Well, what do you think? Let us know how your positive and critical sides rate Super Mario RPG Legend of the 7 Stars in the comments below. But if you just think we chose to make these sprites only because we wanted something Mario and not because it's a great retro classic, then that's exactly right. But you're still just playing with yourself. After years of waiting for the release of what we only knew as the sequel to The Legend of Zelda Breath of the Wild, Tears of the Kingdom is finally here! What with how the collective gaming hive mind drones have responded to this game online, you could have easily mistaken it for the second coming of Christ. At least we're not gonna crucify him a second time, right? Why are you looking at me like that? Is it the Koroks? I mean, yeah, some people have been literally crucifying Koroks with a new Ultra hit. No? Oh, come on! Everybody loves this game! It's just Breath of the Wild, but bigger! Sure, you didn't think Breath of the Wild deserved its praise and perfect scores either, but you still gave it a pretty solid review overall. But listen, how can the rest of the industry see this as like a no-contest game of the year with nearly unanimous perfect scores all around, and you are the only person who, once again, doesn't agree? I haven't said a thing yet. Oh, I see, so you do like it? Nope. Okay, well, I thought it was fun. And I had the insightful experience of playing it alongside Dark Souls 2. Doesn't the internet hate that game? That's what I heard as well. But guess what? We're talking about Zelda, right? It's the direct antithesis of Tears of the Kingdom in almost every way. Because it's an underrated sequel versus an overrated one? Because Dark Souls 2 is conceptually and mechanically a pure evolution of its previous installment, taking chances and creative opportunities to recapture the feeling of the original's core design philosophy to create something entirely new, as opposed to directly copying it outright for an unimaginative and safe sequel like Tears of the Kingdom. Don't tell me this is gonna be one of those reviews. I literally have a master's degree in fine art, so this may just be my deeply analytical background showing through when I say that Tears of the Kingdom is a lazy, horrendously written, bloated mess of a game that completely misses the entire point of Breath of the Wild. Yeah? And here's why. Like most of you, I played Breath of the Wild. If I wanted to play it again, I would just boot it up and do so. I don't need to pay $70 for something I already own. Okay, I do agree the price hike for this game in particular does feel a little greedy, considering how similar these two games are at times. My point is that Breath of the Wild was engaging because it was a fresh idea for the series, exploring something entirely new while also going back to its roots. And Tears of the Kingdom is a grossly uninspired sequel just blowing bubbles in the bathwater, accomplishing absolutely nothing. Okay, so it's structurally identical to Breath of the Wild in almost every way, so I guess you could just check out that review and call it a shameless plug. I might sound overly bitter about the inspirationless design, and I'm sorry, but that's the entire point of a sequel! Otherwise, why was this even made, other than money? We've got to start somewhere, Hamster. I know, I'm sorry. I wasn't even that excited about this game for pre-launch, and I am still disappointed. So this time, Link's got 4 different abilities, replacing his Sheikah Slate ones from last time, and the big gimmicky one is called Ultra Hand, allowing Link to combine objects on the fly with magical glowy toothpaste to construct all sorts of vehicles and solve puzzles. You know, this is weird, because it makes for some fun gameplay when it works, but it never once feels like Zelda. I almost wish this gimmick was instead used in its own new IP instead of blowing it on Zelda in a one-off game where we'll likely never see it again, as it never meshed with Zelda in the first place. I did have some fun building all sorts of crazy contraptions, but I quickly realized that the game's awkward physics and battery limitations restrict its usefulness drastically, and I ended up just throwing some fans on the back of a glider wing almost every single time instead. Cause it's time consuming! It takes you out of the game! The controls are clunky! Battery-powered gear all have limited despawn ranges, and because of all this compounding, you'll likely stop trying to build new creations and instead just use the basics so you can get a move on. Your next ability is Fuse, which is different from your other fusing ability for absolutely no reason. Yeah, it's not like we could have done with some utility to make the shrines more interesting instead. Yeah, so this filler ability lets Link basically use Ultra Hand, but on his weapons, shields, and arrows. The reason you'd want to is to increase their durability, versatility, or attack power. People complained about breakable weapons, so instead of fixing the problem, Nintendo actually made everything more brittle just to incentivize this new time-wasting exercise. How come when I fuse like a boulder to my sword, Link doesn't struggle to lift it or anything? The game doesn't behave logically at all when it comes to this fuse ability, and it could have made for some super creative gameplay where you have to resourcefully twist your environment into weapons, but instead everything's just seen as a number. Also, my least favorite part of Breath of the Wild is the ridiculous amount of time the game makes you sift through menus. Not only is this problem amplified in Tears, with even more clutter in your bottomless pockets, but fusing arrows one shot at a time with a time-stopping menu taking you out of the action every single shot is an abject failure in understanding the flaws of Breath of the Wild. But fusing stuff to your shield, on the other hand, is where it's at. Your shields are no longer just for blocking and surfing. You can now attach springs, cannons, and even whole minecarts to them just to increase their versatility. Regardless, the breakable gear disincentivizes you from playing with the cool stuff you found in favor of just attaching one stick to another stick. Moving on to the next ability is Ascend, allowing Link to dive upward and swim through the ceiling to reach the roof. Considering the entire point of Breath of the Wild was to subconsciously tease you into getting on top of things, this, it kind of takes all the fun out of it. Really? I didn't like it because it felt like 30% of the shrines were just reminding you that you even have this ability, as if I'd forget considering it's designed to get you out of the game's overkill of caves and wells. You can also use Ascend to subvert most of the game's puzzle design, as if rocket shields and crafting super long bridges weren't enough for you. These abilities are all so overpowered and nearly impossible to design around, most of the shrines ended up being basic tests of the same thing over and over again. You're forgetting the most broken one of all. Oh, yeah. So Recall is just time stop again, except it'll actually make objects return to their original positions too. This is incredibly busted. Not only does it send enemy projectiles sailing right back at them, or giant boulders back into the sky for you to ascend with, but it also allows you to cheese pretty much every shrine in the game all by itself. So you acquire all these abilities in a contained starting area like the Great Plateau last time, before descending to the greater map. However, the Great Sky Island is no Great Plateau, feeling more stale and dumbed down than before. Worse off is that you'll realize that the opening Sky Island makes up the majority of the landmass in the sky. Yeah, exactly. like this game. The suckiest part about this is when you'll descend, you'll practically be directed toward the first town where you'll get your main quests in, even Paraglider, sabotaging Breath of the Wild's best moment, freely flying away from the Great Plateau in whatever direction you wanted and ready to take on the world. I fought against this for as long as I possibly could in my livestream series, which you can go watch, shameless plug, until I inevitably gave up and realized just how hand-holdy and chit-chatty this game is compared to its predecessor. Once again, completely missing the elegance of Breath of the Wild. Well, with the Sky Islands being disappointingly bare and the entire map of Hyrule being recycled from last time, the new changes to discover are all in the new caves and enemies, even though it just kind of boils down to them looking a little more horny. Enemies, as in they just put like horns on everything and called it different. Hey, they brought back likes and Gibdos, so in that sense it's neat. But anyway, you'll also notice that all of the shrines have been moved around, which mechanically, of course they are, but it's kind of a shame because last time the terrain was specifically modeled so that you would discover new shrines over, around, and between the mountainous landscape, giving you distracting new goals to work towards. Yeah, and this time you can just pause, fast travel to a nearby tower, get launched in the sky, scope out everything from above, and just fly right over to wherever you want to go. It's cool the first few times until you realize that you're actually being robbed of the entire reason that Breath of the Wild felt so good to explore. But the coolest addition to this game is the depths, a whole new map below Hyrule that you'll explore by diving through massive caverns and slowly illuminating the darkness, revealing the map with light routes. The light routes even correspond in location with shrines up on the surface, helping you seek out any of those hidden shrines that you missed. The fact that they hit the depths pre-launch as a surprise for players was really cool. I just wish it were more fun to explore. So yeah, the depths is covered in gloom, which is the new name for Malice for some reason, and all of the enemies down there deal damage in gloom as well, making it a bit annoying to traverse. Actually, I was gonna say it kind of sucks because of the sheer darkness, making vehicular travel, you know, the entire main gimmick of the game, extremely difficult and even more time-consuming. Oh, I was gonna say it sucked because the only reason to go down there is to mine and collect Zoanite, a new material you'll need 100 of to craft a single energy charge, which you will also need 100 of in order to increase your measly battery by one little notch. If I wanted to play Minecraft, I would have. But how come Zelda lately is just devolving into a generic looty crafty game? I don't buy the new game just to cook new recipes or mine bigger numbers in caves, and I can't imagine that's what the Zelda community wants either. At least there's some new threats in the depths, but regardless, you won't find anything down there, on the surface, or in the sky that'll even remotely replace Guardians in terms of their threat level. The ancient Sheikah technology all just inexplicably vanished, along with your Sheikah Slate. In our original review, we kept accidentally referring to the champions as Guardians, but the champions all return, well, minus Rivali, thank God. Instead, we get Tulin, the headstrong twerpy bird, filling in the same role. Okay, now this absolutely sucks. So once again, you have 4 dungeons to complete in the exact same 4 places as last time, where you'll join up with pretty much the same 4 people as before and get a marginally different ability than last time. Like, I played this game already! Give me something new! Now you're starting to sound like me. And I could swear that pre-launch, Eiji Aonuma claimed that this was a return to traditional dungeons or something like that. Bull crap, these are just as short and easily cheesable as last time. There is a hidden 5th one at least. At the expense of losing Hyrule Castle as a dungeon, let's not pretend that's a good thing. Well, the dungeon bosses aren't all phantom iterations of the same thing. But instead we just got a bunch of puzzle bosses? I'm sorry, I'll take a challenging duel boss any day over a gimmicky clean the sludge or rock'em sock'em robots fight. Keep it coming, Mr. Positive Gamer. This is a good cleanse. I'm not even at the worst part yet. Ooh. Now to activate any of your companion's abilities, you have to physically run up to them and tap A before you can get their effect, instead of just having it mapped to a freaking button input like last time. Yeah, why is the game going out of its way to make its only changes quality of life hindrances? Tulin's is just Rivali's Gale, but behind you. Yunobo just blows stuff up, Sidon makes things wet, and Riju tiptoe dances away from you, constantly making you have to chase her down to even initiate her goddamn lightning ability, which instead of simply using like last time, she's apparently lost all concept of how to aim unless Link shoots an arrow at something that is specifically enclosed within her slowly expanding yellow bubble of electricity. Don't you just wish you could spin attack like last time? The boss fight where you need her to cooperate is so outrageously bad, I don't know if words can properly describe describe it. This massive boss needs to be completely within her electric bubble in order to be shot with an arrow and thus struck by lightning and made vulnerable, but it's always backing away from you and shooting you with blasts of energy, and freaking Riju's electric orb just fizzles out if you can't shoot something in time, making you chase after her again. All the while you're being absolutely swarmed with Gibdos, and Riju is just mockingly scurrying away from you like a hyperactive ballet dancer.
Did you even like this game?
Other than that, it's just like Breath of the Wild, and that's good.
Yeah, it's a pretty good video game.
You think so?
But it's a terrible Zelda game.
What am I supposed to say? It's exactly the same as last time.
Technically, it's better optimized than last time, allowing you to fly and zoom through areas more quickly.
But this is just a Majora's Mask situation where the models and animations were just ploinked from last time. Ploinked is a word.
At least Majora's Mask was an entirely new game with new ideas shaking up the groundwork.
Well, the sky is hazy and the depths are jet black. What else do you want me to say? This game's story absolutely doesn't respect your time.
Considering our Breath of the Wild review was under 14 minutes and looking at how much longer this one is,
not the same. Thing is, we have actual points and aren't simply rambling for minutes on end. And that's what most of this game's dialogue is like. Characters just needlessly banter back and forth about nothing, far longer than even I could tolerate. After your first regional phenomenon quest, you will almost certainly be mashing A through the other 3.
I made sure to fairly read it all too, even out loud most of the time, just to make sure that nobody could come along and say that it got better later or anything. So I can now confidently say, no, it doesn't.
Probably the most frustrating part about the story is how incomprehensibly moronic Link is this time. He finds out the truth about Zelda's whereabouts and the regional phenomenon pretty quickly, but he won't warn anyone or share what he's discovered, even when he is working as an investigative journalist on the matter and people's lives are at stake.
You think he's exaggerating, but when half of the game's quests could have been immediately solved or outright prevented had Link just said something to anyone, then it'll drive you insane throughout the course of the game.
So it's high time we finally talk about the story itself. So here's your spoiler warning skip time if you haven't cleared the game yet, or realize by now that it's not going to be worth your time. However, I really want to discuss a few things that happen in particular, considering how absolutely awful this story is.
I wouldn't say awful, just not well thought out, and badly in need of an editor.
The game begins with Link and Zelda in a freaking slow walking simulator segment, culminating in them uncovering Ganondorf's corpse beneath Hyrule Castle, which comes to life, destroys the Master Sword, and flings Zelda into a ravine. How do the actual Breath of the Wild developers not understand the elegance to their opening of their own game to make such a colossal misstep in this sequel? Probably because it just came out in interviews that they didn't play or research anything since Breath of the Wild came out and development on Tears began.
If that wasn't egotistical on their part, it was monumentally dense.
Speaking of not doing your research, turns out Zelda was flung into the distant past and meets Rauru and Sonia, the original king and queen respectively of the newly established Hyrule, dealing with the looming threat of Ganondorf invading the kingdom and eventually overpowering everyone.
You're piecing all this together by finding Dragon Tear memories, just like last time, by the way.
So to restore the broken Master Sword and safely transport it to Link in the future, Zelda decides to swallow what's called a secret stone, because naming things is hard, which transforms her into an eternal dragon. She was warned to never do this as it would effectively kill her in the process, but she does it anyway just to ensure that the future could be saved, as the Master Sword could be slowly restored in her care until Link in the future can find her and uncover what has happened.
When it hit me at what happened, it was really something.
I saw the huge light dragon fly by and quickly launched from a nearby tower to see it, whereupon closer inspection, I saw the Master Sword lodged in its forehead, and I realized that was Zelda's hair, and all of a sudden it was just so sad and genuinely a powerful way to deliver back the Master Sword to Link. Yeah, and then the game continues to hit you with more and more cutscenes, making it painfully clear exactly what happened to Zelda, as if we were all as hopelessly brain dead as Link when it comes to picking up on lore. I thought it was really well done, until I had to sit through all the explaining afterward where the game just assumed I was too stupid to figure any of that out. The game has absolutely no confidence in its own storytelling, that's for sure. I haven't even gotten to the worst part about this yet. It was at this moment that the game shifted from being mediocre to outright bad in my mind. And once that happened, everything else just kind of snowballed from there. And to better explain what I'm talking about, I think I need Hamster to elaborate a little bit more on how time travel works in The Legend of Zelda.
So this has all happened before back in Ocarina of Time, and the game made
made it clear how going backward or forward in time and altering history would create a split timeline. For more information on how all of that works, just check out the episode we made explaining the timeline, shameless plug. So follow me here. Zelda is sent back in time, presumably before any other game happens, making Ganondorf's appearance bring more questions to light, but let's not even go there. Yeah, so Ganondorf exists before Demise even happens? Are we just retconning all the past Zelda games now, or has Nintendo just stopped trying? Anyway, she's sent back in time, and even Raru explicitly corrects Zelda's thinking in saying that the Ganondorf she encountered at the basin of Hyrule Castle was not the same guy they are currently dealing with, because she comes from an alternate future where she never traveled to and interfered with her past at all. And he's absolutely right! That is exactly how Ocarina of Time works and why Link had to slay Ganon and stop Ganondorf in the past as a child. So let's visualize this. Zelda goes back to another timeline, and her solution to get back to Link after being corrected about how time works by Raru himself is to become an eternal dragon and wait it out through the millennia to return to modern day, where she assumes Link will be waiting. Problem is, they no longer share a timeline. Link won't be there. Even if Raru's very correct assumption about how time works is false, then how come we never see the light dragon flying in the sky in Breath of the Wild? Forget that mistake. This also means that there were 2 Zeldas and 2 Master Swords at the same time in Breath of the Wild, as well as every other game that took place between this enormous gap, which is heavily implied to be all of them. There were also 2 Ganondorfs as well if their logic is to be followed, but the game can't even follow its own logic. It's the same Ganondorf in the past, and Zelda's dragon transformation trick works, both in direct contradiction of not only how the series has handled this in the past, but also how it was just explained to us by the King of Hyrule himself, who's a furry, by the way. We neglected to mention that. Zelda's series origins just got retconned to a furry and an elf girl, who both bite the dust before bearing any children as descendants, by the way, but let's not dwell on any more catastrophic plot holes any longer because this game sure as heck doesn't. Anyway, back in our timeline, whatever. Link investigates 4 regional phenomena, all boiling down to Ganondorf manipulating people and doing dirty deeds through a puppet Zelda he fabricated. And since Link is a complete imbecile, he falls for this every single time. Regardless, you gather an actual party, although it's only in spirit form because these people have got better things to do, I guess. You go to Hyrule Castle, proceed to fall for the same Phantom Zelda trick over and over again. Oh my god! And the group then catches wind of a 5th sage, albeit extremely slowly, and the breadcrumbs to this dungeon was hidden behind yet another painfully obvious Phantom Zelda ruse that Link totally fell for back in Kakariko Village. So I found this dungeon early, but the game refused to let my hand activation thing work until I was far enough in the story to do so, which makes absolutely no in-game sense and sabotages the entire philosophy of Breath of the Wild. Again. After getting the 5th sage, you dive down below the castle where Ganondorf is obviously waiting, fight a long series of battles meant to simply offer speedrunners a challenge, which for the record didn't work at all, as they easily overcome hordes of monsters and a boss gauntlet by simply clipping through walls, duplicating their items, and glitching weapons. Oh, and once you do beat Ganondorf, he does the obvious thing. Waiting for my phase 3, that's the easiest of the ones. Oh, eat it, man, I want to fight a dragon. And then Zelda's gonna come in and fight us, that's my guess. I don't know how he knew about that, but okay. Yeah, that's not getting explained either. Which leads to yet another easy 3rd phase final boss spectacle fight. But dragons are cool, so I like it. The light dragon appears and forces you to draw the Master Sword if you haven't already, and only exists in this fight to catch you if you fall as you fight in the sky. I get that they wanted Ganon to only be killable by the Master Sword, but oh boy do I not like this. So after beating him, the game pulls a Xenoblade 2 and for absolutely no reason, magically brings Zelda back to life from her dragon state. Don't fix it, no, no. Oh my goodness, no, 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 don't do it, no. You're ruining the sacrifice, don't do it. Why, no, no, don't, oh no, don't. No, I protest to this. Bad, no, no. No! Look, barring all the mistakes and sloppy dialogue, this story was almost good with Zelda's shocking sacrifice. But this is absolutely inexcusable. Just like in Xenoblade 2, it completely soils the entire point that the sacrifice even existed for. Aside from the fact that Zelda is saved by the very people who directly told her that there'd be no going back if she decided to go through with this. So I guess we're retconning stuff from within the same game at this rate. Hold on, so what was Calamity Ganon? Good question, because the game directly claims that Ganondorf's power didn't wane until Zelda and Link just so happened upon his corpse in the depths. Meaning that this entire game was just an outrageous coincidence? And Calamity Ganon has nothing to do with Ganondorf. Then what the heck was— Don't know, don't care. How did you screw up a story this badly? Hey, the devs didn't dwell on it, so neither will I. This music was either all ripped from Breath of the Wild, or they're new tracks that remix old classic themes from Ocarina of Time and Link to the Past, which goes against the entire aesthetic philosophy of Breath of the Wild's soundtrack in the first place. You say that, but somehow this soundtrack is 10 discs long. For crying out loud, it has a total runtime of 12.5 hours. Just think about how much better this story would be had they sat down and thought about it for just 12.5 minutes. Anyway, it's the same as last time, and I still don't care for it. I used to like it, but I played a couple hundred hours of this soundtrack years ago, so now it's just getting on my nerves. Alright, all that sounded pretty harsh, but to be honest, it's still basically Breath of the Wild again. The final battles are especially fun, albeit totally predictable. But the shrines this time aren't the least bit challenging due to your overpowered abilities. The entire game seems to be mostly designed for speedrunners and bait for funny video clips online. I can't accept that The Legend of Zelda has seriously regressed this far in such a short amount of time, even though it's happened before. I'm gonna stop you right there. I think Skyward Sword was better than this. Whoa, you get right out of here with that. It had real dungeons for one, and more of them. Well, yeah. The motion gimmick at least fit the IP as opposed to this Banjo-Kazooie nuts and bolts rip-off Ultra Hand. Sure, but the game was just as chatty and annoying, but at least its story made sense. I don't like what you're insinuating. It even had real permanent items that let you better explore the world and engage with combat. You know, like an actual Zelda game. All my items broke and so did my heart. I think Skyward Sword is a better Zelda game than Tears of the Kingdom. What have you got to say about that? This game's $70! Skyward Sword is $50. But everybody else loves this game! And you know Nintendo's never gonna change after rolling in this much cash. This might be the end of traditional Zelda games as we know it. And on that note, the positive gamer in me at best sees the fun in The Legend of Zelda Tears of the Kingdom equaling its own weight in gloom, with an average 5 out of 10. When its only good aspects are effectively ripped from Breath of the Wild without any care or context, the rest of it genuinely feels like overhyped, overpriced DLC. The critical gamer in me genuinely sees the flaws in The Legend of Zelda Tears of the Kingdom equaling in severity to Skyward Sword with a devastating 3 out of 10, albeit for completely different reasons. This game proves that Nintendo has absolutely no understanding as to why Breath of the Wild became the industry standard for open-world games in the first place with this tone-deaf, greedy sequel. Sure, your positive rating can fluctuate wildly for this game based on how much you like creating giant flaming penis rockets, but not your critical score. So be honest here. What do you think? Let us know about your positive and critical scores in the comments below for Legend of Zelda Tears of the Kingdom. If there's anything we can learn from looking at Dark Souls 2 and Tears of the Kingdom together, it's that you should never thoughtlessly conform to the popular consensus of a game. Be your own person and form your own opinions, even if it means disagreeing with my own. I don't care, I'm not better than anyone else, but if you can't separate yourself from feeling the way that you were told to feel about a video game, then you are just playing with yourself. Zoomy! Wowzers! Hey kids, I'm the marvelous, amazing, spectacular man spider person! That's right, the character created by Steve Ditko and grossly appropriated by the pompous, egotistical dirtbag Stan Lee. Look it up. Anyway, I need your help, kids! You see, even though I'm a superpowered genius, I never had the foresight to patent any of my inventions and share them for the betterment of the greater community. So I'm broke! Now I do birthday parties, Halloween parties, bachelor parties, graduations, bar mitzvahs, even funerals! You also make great stickers for my daughter's potty training. Yes, I need to do that too. Wow, I'm so versatile and worth the investment! And did I spy one sticker missing? Yeah, she picked that one when she laid down some brown spider eggs in the toilet, though likely just by sheer dumb luck, as it's never happened again since. I am so proud of her. And my immensely marketable image. Well, after seeing you get turned into incentives for my toddler to take a dump on command, that marketability certainly changes my impression of you. Maybe a GoFundMe page would be less humiliating. She only knows you through pooping. Wait till she finds out about your TV shows and comics and movies. Spidey may be strapped for cash, but he's also proud to be your pot of gold at the end of your rainbow toilet journey. Now go drop a greasy, steamy stinker for your pal Spider-Man. Well, not exactly right now, just do it on the potty seat so your dad doesn't have to keep cleaning it off of you. Bomb. What, you don't think this will work? So we technically already reviewed this in our massive licensed game episode, but considering we also reviewed 49 other games in it, and everything basically got 2 sentences and a number, it made sense to give this game the time of day in a full review. It was also requested. Yeah, and it got requested, but I hope this helps point out just how absolutely pointless and stupid review numbers are. If the numbers actually held any real meaning, then this review video would be technically redundant. We gave it a 10 and a 9 respectively. Spoilers? Come on, it's dumb enough that we intentionally review games with 2 scores just to muddy the waters. If anything, we do it just to make fun of the review scoring process in general. So anyway, a near perfect score for Marvel Spider-Man must be pretty darn good. Yeah, now prepare for me to complain for most of this video and still justify a 9. You played Spider-Man on the GameCube, right? The Sam Raimi movie tie-in video game based on the comics? Yeah, this series has always been a little disjointed. Keep in mind, this all culminates in potty training stickers. Anyway, the game stood out for its web-slinging segments, where you'd get free reign to swing around New York, even though your webs would just shoot straight up into the sky instead of actually going from building to building. Not like the Marvel Spider-Man 2018 game, which we are actually reviewing, which fixed that for the most part. But most importantly, it's a blast! You really feel like you're actually swinging through Manhattan 100 miles an hour between buildings and chasing down cars and helicopters, or just taking the long way to your destination instead of fast traveling, since the web swinging is just that much fun. Spider-Man has a good weight to him, and maybe it's the motion blur effects or the fact that the entirety of Manhattan is loaded at once that makes this feel indescribably immersive. It's also fun discovering all sorts of hidden photo op spots. Even though it adds up to basically nothing, having some reason to engage with the huge map just gives you enough of a reward as it is. And it's even just like when you land in the middle of a huge pile of civilians. They'll just cheer or ask for autographs or selfies, and it means absolutely nothing, but it feels good to pretend like you're liked for a moment. That all helps a lot considering the rest of the gameplay is basically just a watered down Batman Arkham series. Combat especially is nearly identical, isolating and picking off generic mooks one by one with upgradable gadgets and outfits from across the series. Though the game does have some actual Spider-Man villains and some incredible cinematic set pieces, 90% of your time is going to be spent fighting groups of no-name generic Walmart brand bad guys on the same rooftops and same street corners. Those unique character villains all get taken out disappointingly quickly. The Sinister Six all break out of prison at once, getting you excited for some real action, only to have them all quickly thrown right back in the slammer. But hey, those scenes are still really fun to experience, even though there's a disappointingly shallow amount of it in the game amidst the disproportionately large amount of Ubisoft-esque bland open world video gaminess. There's also all those forced stealth segments where you gotta play as Mary Jane, grinding the game's pacing to a screeching halt. Ooh, those sucked. And all the times Peter has to play that minigame from BioShock to simulate working in a lab. Why was that even in the game? And don't forget the painfully slow walking simulator Miles Morales segments before he even gets any powers. Swinging around the city is really fun. Yeah, I got to see New York without dealing with the awful, smelly subway infestation of rats, intolerable roaches, humans. Well, there is an entire radio show dedicated to hating your guts. Gotta simulate the real New York somehow. And the game's totally not glitchy, except for all the times that it is. See them all? They're, falling. Let's get closer. I'm supposed to take these guys out, but, we're having issues. He doesn't even recognize it as an enemy. What if I did this? Hey, buddy! This game looks great! So great I wish it were toned down a notch so the loading was a little better. I am not one of those parasites whining about no ray tracing on my window reflections. I didn't even play this on a PS4 Pro, and I think it looked fine. People are actually complaining about the new game looking only slightly better than this one. And Wow! Can you have less troubles in your life to be that petty about a fantastically realized video game? About a comic book character? Do you not realize how lucky we are that this doesn't downright suck? Just ask Square Enix how the modern Avengers are holding up lately. However, I'm just now finding out about a huge graphical overhaul for a remastered version, which probably only happened because of those hopeless, out-of-touch crybabies. Almost certainly just slowed down development for the sequel, but at least it probably looks better. They completely changed Peter's face. But what? Oh my god! He actually looked like a real, relatable, physically and mentally overwhelmed human being before. Now he just looks like he sings for One Direction. They're still a thing, right? No, not for like 10 years. Now who's the irrational whiner? But this is a legitimate downgrade! Go play the GameCube game. This looks phenomenal. Shut up. The game opens with that Marvel flipbook animation thing, so you know from the get-go that this will probably be a plot hole-ridden, sloppily written disaster. But it's not, though! It's actually breaking a lot of those crappy movie stereotypes. Peter Parker starts the game 8 years into being Spider-Man, and most of his major villains are already imprisoned, cutting right to the interesting part of his career and not dwelling on retelling his origin story for the 9 trillionth time. Yeah, he's clearly reaching for things to do, considering he starts out by taking down a Daredevil villain. The actual story does a good job of portraying what makes Spider-Man stories interesting, a constant bombardment of one guy's incredibly stressful work-life balance. But its new villain is so forgettable, I don't think I could even explain a single interesting thing that this guy even did. Even while looking at his wiki, Mr. Negative's even named after his own insignificant inclusion. I think he might have inadvertently killed Miles' dad. Whatever. Well, Critical Gamer, we should have called you Mr. Negative. Cute. You do eventually get a real final boss fight with Dr. Octopus, which even the most ignorant of Spider-Man fans will see coming from the very beginning, as you spend half the game working for the guy, and all the while the game lays it on incredibly thick with its foreshadowing. It's even got one of those famous Marvel post-credit teases lining up what's to come, and though it's implying the return of some more familiar characters, it's done in a unique spin that has piqued my interest. So sure, the overarching story is kind of messy with its pacing issues, but luckily it's all held together with good, fun writing fitting the characters, and the climax also feels like a strong payoff that was actually built up throughout the game. So nothing like an actual Marvel movie. Exactly! So this is in the same vein as basically all the other modern video game music soundtracks, where it's epic and grand, but completely lacking of any core melody or memorable tracks you'll want to download. Anymore, this should just be the sound design segment, considering I just want to talk about voice direction in modern games instead. Sure, the voice acting was great. Spider-Man in particular was cast perfectly. He's probably my favorite current iteration of the Spider guy. Did you notice that the voice for Electro was Josh Keaton, the voice of Peter from the old Spectacular Spider-Man cartoon? Oh, that means when they meet, they can totally do the thing! You mean... And that's about the extent of my Spider-Man knowledge, outside of potty training stickers. Ever wanted to take a sightseeing trip to New York City, but you're too disturbed by the fact that it's basically a human anthill on an island? Well, this game's surprisingly good for that. It also happens to have Spider-Man in it. It's ironic that Insomniac Games, the creators of the ingenious LOD system in Spyro the Dragon, would go on to make this impressive open-world map of a real place utilizing the same brilliant game design techniques that immortalize their importance in the industry. Look, I don't even like Spider-Man that much, or even Marvel for that matter. I even said for over a decade that Invincible is where it's at, but I still highly recommend this game in spite of it all. If you liked Batman Arkham Asylum, you've basically already played this game, but as a Metroidvania. But the best part is swinging through the city! My mistake, you basically already played this game. I can't stress enough, these games play identically. Come on, superheroes are all about shameless rip-offs. The positive gamer in me... You know what, screw it. Sure, I had enough fun with Marvel Spider-Man, but only by comparison to the rest of the disastrous pandemonium that is Marvel. So I'm instead giving it an 8 out of 10, because I think it had its great moments, but actually had a lot of room for improvement in hindsight. And I'm a human being, and I'm allowed to have an evolving opinion. Bite me. The critical gamer in me also thinks a change of score is in order for Marvel Spider-Man, with a 7 out of 10. Maybe we rated it highly by comparison to the rest of the dumpster fire of licensed games we reviewed all at once, but hey, we are an IGN, and a 7 still means it's well above average. Yes! Now we've rated this game a 10, a 9, an 8, and a 7. What do you think? Let us know how your positive and critical sides rate Marvel Spider-Man in the comments below. Now, if you're still under the delusion that review scores actually mean anything, then you're just playing with yourself. Sticker? Well, everybody recommended we just skip Dark Souls 2, but it looks like we're ignoring the warnings anyway. Dark Souls 1 is such a masterpiece that I can't imagine that the sequel could be so bad that it'd even deserve contemplating the notion of skipping it. Well, I hear the game is much harder this time. It's a sequel, I expected as much. And supposedly the story is irrelevant to 3. That's objectively untrue. It actually recontextualizes 1, adding even more impact to the game's overall narrative. If anything, it's 3 with a redundant story. And the big thing people hate is that the world is no longer interconnected like in 1. Then why doesn't everybody hate 3 as well? I heard nothing but bad things about this game going in, but not only was everybody wrong about it, but they were wrong! I see, so once again we're arguing why popular games are trash and why unpopular games are actually misunderstood. I'd rather be unknown and honest than popular and fake. Nobody's watching this anyway, right? Hey, they're still here! Okay, so here's why the internet's wrong again. Silly me, I thought this would be easy after beating Dark Souls 4 times over. Wait, what does adaptability do? Apparently this game was designed to, quote, prey on human senses and phobias, auditory hallucinations, vertigo, and acrophobia. And I gotta say, it worked. Now please never do that again, FromSoft. How did this game retain so many constants from the first game and yet still make me feel lost, disoriented, weak, and helpless, even with all my experience in the series? The original director, Hidetaka Miyazaki, was busy with Bloodborne at the time and merely acted as a supervisor to this game? How is this not a structural disaster? Because he's just one guy. Don't undersell the rest of the talented FromSoft. This game still scares me! Me too! It's wonderful! Dark Souls is one of those seemingly impossible games to make a sequel for, narratively and functionally. How do you move on from either in a way that will add meaningful content to Dark Souls? By subverting the player's expectations and deliberately designing the game around heightening the challenges while also changing up some precious crutches they use to force them to rethink the entire game. And as for the story, we'll get to that later. This game absolutely preys on your instincts from completing Dark Souls 1. It sets you up for traps, forces you to unlearn mechanics in favor of new ones, and even fakes you out with your own expectations repeatedly. Yeah, like when you leave your opening tutorial area expecting a boss akin to the Asylum Demon, you brace for impact and instead are hit with this safe, beautiful seaside vista, Majula. Majula is your hub, so to speak, and through 4 different branching paths from this point, you'll encounter the 4 main bosses you need to defeat on your quest before progressing toward the final challenge. But when you die, because of course you will, you'll discover one of the game's big new changes. Instead of becoming hollow immediately upon death, you'll slowly hollow, losing 1 blip of your max HP at a time until capping at half HP. And the only way to restore this lost health bar is by consuming the game's replacement for humanity, a human effigy. I found that this is mostly a psychological trick, making you feel like you're losing ground and hope, even though you're almost certainly never gonna run out of human effigies. And even at full health, you'll likely still die just as easily as if you had half. There's also this new contentious stat, adaptability, which is directly tied to how many invincibility frames you have when you dodge roll, meaning if you neglect it, you'll be prone to all sorts of seemingly unfair damage while rolling. I actually think this is pretty cool, as it's basically a stat for how clumsy you are. Considering Dark Souls stats and gameplay are all about accepting realistic mechanics to make the game more authentic and challenging, this stat makes perfect sense. It also doesn't take too much investment to match or even surpass the first game's iframes, so don't be a whiner. So most of the game you'll actually be teleporting from bonfire to bonfire, chipping away at one of those 4 branching paths at a time based on which one you're feeling the least intimidated by at the moment. And since they don't interconnect and allow for warping to begin with, the goal is to simply reach new bonfires in order to gain ground and not to fully explore the ins and outs of the greater world. Yeah, and that kinda sucks. But to transition from Dark Souls 1, this allows for the development of more level-based design, offering up a different kind of challenge to even the most experienced of players. So it's like starting Dark Souls 1 with the Lord Vessel, and instead of organically exploring the world design, you're directly pit against multiple long corridor-like challenge areas designed to wear you down before the next bonfire, or one of the game's cornucopia of bosses. The bosses are even designed to disorient and recontextualize themselves based on your past experiences. Some you'll challenge later as regular enemies, or face again but with completely different stipulations to their fight, catching you off guard. This even goes back to referencing the first game. Instead of Ornstein and Smough, arguably the hardest fight in the first game, you run into Ornstein alone, showing how different the fight is without his overweight executioner buddy. And instead of fighting 2 gargoyles atop a bell tower, you face 6. There are so many bosses that luckily these encounters are rare and don't come off as cheap, but instead feel like creative fights that made me think about the game in ways I'd never considered before, and for that alone were definitely worth the inclusion. A lot of familiar enemies pull the same sort of stunts too. I do want to gripe though that too many of the boss fights are basically just against a big solitary knight and not against monstrous horrors of some sort like was previously established as the standard. I'm not gonna complain because I bought this game just craving more Dark Souls, and Dark Souls 2 is the epitome of more. It can't even end normally without 4 final bosses fought back to back. The first 2 even fight you at the same time! I'm not joking! It's like, you want more Dark Souls? Okay, well you asked for it. Please stop hitting me. More! Well, this is another inevitable jump in graphical quality moving from one console generation to another, but something about the first game's areas and bosses made them far more memorable to me. That's probably because once you get through an area, there's absolutely no reason to ever backtrack through it, since you can warp from the get-go, debilitating your memory of its place in the world. The game's also so much longer than before, it makes me start to forget whole areas or handfuls of bosses. Or maybe I should just get that checked out by a doctor. Oh yeah, light also plays a huge role this time, with your torch being an integral tool to get you through particularly dark places, lighting sconces and scaring off some enemies. Oh, and remember how the first game had secret illusory walls you would hit to reveal the way? Well, now they're straight up imperceptible, and all over the place after a certain point, but instead of hitting the walls, you've got to tap X while hugging every single flat surface you come across in hopes that one of them will open up into a door revealing the secret instead. You learn that after the game lets you knock down the one and only traditional illusory wall, tricking returning players into fruitlessly smacking the walls for the rest of the game. Jerks! Guess who fell for it? I'm telling you, this game is designed to drive you crazy. It works. Jerks! Instead of treading the same ground as before, the storytelling and ramifications for the endings luckily add considerable weight to the series as a whole. Not something I expect out of a sequel nowadays. So the story begins from your perspective as your character becomes afflicted by the curse of the undead and begins to hollow. And through an impressive cinematic, we watch as your own memories and loved ones fade away in front of you, leaving you alone and without purpose. Already, we're making this huge aspect of the first game feel real by showing it affect us directly. So you catch wind of a legend proclaiming that the secret to undoing the curse of the undead lies in the distorted realm of Drangleic, which you enter by diving headfirst into a swirling mystic typhoon. As one does. And when you come to, you meet a group of aging firekeepers who've long abandoned their purpose and instead mock you for even attempting this hopeless quest. They also warn you that your journey will lead you to the gates of Drangleic Castle, but you'll only find yourself wondering why you even came. That's because the more time people spend in this twisted world, they slowly lose sight of their purpose and mentally unravel until they've completely forgotten themselves and what brought them here to begin with. Now, if the fabric of space-time was falling apart in the land of Lord Dran, it's absolutely shredded in Drangleic. The game's areas are even connected in nonsensical ways designed to bewilder you as you explore the world, so you can too feel the effects of second-guessing your own memories when confronted with an illogical reality. Now, of course, this is happening to the NPCs you meet as well, and though it's especially tragic seeing, like, the blacksmith's daughter return to Majula only for her to forget about him entirely, basically every NPC questline ends this exact same way, and that's a tad disappointing. It's done to hammer home the magnitude of what it means to lose the self, and why you've come this far in the first place. Unless, of course, you've already forgotten. So you meet the Emerald Herald, the firekeeper stand-in, who levels you up and upgrades your Estus flasks if you bring the right consumables to burn in the bonfire. And she directs you toward gaining strength by gathering the souls of 4 powerful old ones so that you'll have a chance at storming Drangleic Castle to usurp King Vendrick. Throughout the game, Vendrick is built up as a king among kings who waged war against the giants, slew his enemies, and built a mighty empire. But when you finally defeat the 4 old ones and reach his castle, you'll be surprised to find that instead of a final boss fight, Vendrick isn't there. Turns out he fled and sealed himself away deep down in the undead crypt, where you will find him completely hollowed, stripped of his clothes, and walking around aimlessly in dazed circles while sad piano music melodies play to orchestrate this massive subversion of your expectations. And the worst part is, for the true ending, you've gotta kill him anyway. He doesn't even have a health bar or fight back until you wail on him for a while. But once he does, it's a real test of endurance, as his HP and attack power are ludicrous. Assuming you're playing the Scholar of the First Sin edition, you can then hunt down the crowns of long-forgotten kings and bring them back to Vendrick's discarded clothing to enter his memories, speak to him in the past, and have him restore their original strength, which if worn, completely prevent hollowing. The game is so long, you as a player have probably forgotten by now, but remember your family, your entire life that just faded away? It hurt you so much that you decided to throw yourself into this nightmare just on the off chance that you would find a way to fulfill this prophecy and break the curse? Mechanically, it's kind of useless at that point, but I think that's the point. The tragedy is that you did technically find a cure for the curse, but only for yourself, and everyone else around you will still have their minds rot away, and it will continue to affect countless others until the end of time. Well, that sucks. However, you still got a final boss to confront, or rather 4, culminating in facing Aldea, the mad brother of Vendrick, whose experiments transformed him into a hideous flaming wicker man. Aldea explains to you that this world is cursed to retread these same events indefinitely due to Gwyn's linking of the First Flame, an act he refers to as the First Sin. So let's get this straight. Countless undead have fought their way to the end of Dark Souls 1 and chose to either link the fire or snuff it out. But in the end, no matter what, time is cyclical, and we are inevitably going to have to do all of this all over again just because of Gwyn's nyctophobia? With that revelation, Aldea presents you with a choice. Either take your seat upon the throne of want and replace Vendrick, continuing this cycle as its new ruler, or abandon the throne in an attempt to break the cycle and pursue an unknown future. And that future is likely one where Ash itself begins to rise and become trapped in the cycle as well. So let's take inventory here. It managed to take 2 sad, hopeless endings and make them 1 sad, hopeless ending. Isn't it brilliant how terrible that is? Yes? I love it! Well, if there's gonna be any segment that feels like a formulaic sequel, I guess this one's the least disappointing to choose. The music operates and sounds almost exactly the same as last time, just appearing during boss fights or specific environments. Which is fine. Yeah, but with the way the gameplay and story were both so well thought out and reimagined to expand the series, it's a shame that the music is basically just Dark Souls 2? Yes, exactly! Yes, this is a harder, meaner, and longer Dark Souls, but take some comfort knowing that if an area really is giving you trouble, that enemies will eventually stop respawning this time after you kill them enough times, clearing the path forward and even making your deaths count towards real progress. That was most likely implemented to prevent any cheesy soul-grinding exploits like last time, but for an experienced player like myself, whenever I notice that an area's enemies are no longer respawning, instead of feeling relief, I just feel embarrassed at how much I actually suck. Well, if you're one of those players who's into getting bang for your buck in terms of game length, Dark Souls 2 is about 20 hours longer than 1 or 3. But if you're not one to appreciate the aesthetic design of video games or their subtext, then instead just expect a game sequel to be the exact same thing again, then good, because you're the exact type of person this game was deliberately designed to break. The positive gamer in me was surprised to discover just how much there was to appreciate in Dark Souls 2 with a burning 8 out of 10. For how terrifying and effective the new design framework is, I find myself more relieved that I was able to beat it and less eager to play it all over again. But I'd absolutely never suggest that fans of the original pass up this incredible follow-up. The critical gamer in me is shocked with the performance of Dark Souls 2 enough to crown it with a 10 out of 10. Whether the general audience picked up on it or not, this is the exact kind of creative thinking we need in sequels. It's the perfect mix of the unfamiliar and series-defined staples to carve out a place in history all its own. But what do you think? Let us know how your positive and critical sides rate Dark Souls 2 Scholar of the First Sin in the comments below. Dark Souls 2 was so well designed, it actually did nothing but hurt my impression of Dark Souls 3, which by comparison feels lazy and uninspired. And we like that game! But if you're not willing to give a game a fair chance just because of what you heard online, then you'll never have the chance to let this medium surprise you, 'cause you're just playing with yourself. Oh boy, am I excited to get back into Shin Megami Tensei after reviewing the first game. That was easily the most insane game story I've ever experienced. But remember, that was a Super Famicom game, and so was its direct sequel. It wasn't until a decade later on the PS2 that we'd even get an actual numbered Shin Megami Tensei game localized. 3 Nocturne. Wait, but if we never got a Shin Megami Tensei game up to that point, doesn't that mean that the name would have meant absolutely nothing untranslated? If it literally means new reincarnation of the goddess, then why didn't they just call it Goddess Reborn or something? The series was already well established by this point in Japan. This was far from the 3rd game. But still keeping the 3 on there, plus with the subtitle Nocturne, this title just screams, you need to play the others before playing me! But in the West, they didn't even exist. Would you rather they started the numbering over like Final Fantasy did, just to go back on it later when worldwide releases became the new industry standard? I guess not. Well, at least we can finally play 3 Nocturne with the new HD remaster. Actually, it's a remaster of the Maniac's Chronicle version. What does that even mean? It's like the 3rd or so version of Shin Megami Tensei 3. Yes. The 3rd 3. Yes. Forget that. From now on, we're referring to this game as Smut 3. Must we pronounce it like Smut? Atlas didn't want to localize the title, so I will. Smut. Finally, we've got some smut on the PS2, but good lord, it's just as unforgiving as it was on the Super Famicom. At least demons can level up and inherit moves now. But what does that matter when bosses can just randomly decide to have like 6 more turns? Man, all it takes is one bad random encounter to utterly obliterate you. This game is insane. Why did we strip down to just our shoes and shorts? I, for one, didn't need a PS2 penis, ignoring the Prada's dangly bits. But what do his tattoos do down there? Stop. Do they frame around his hips or wrap around it like a candy cane? Why are you like this? Hey, somebody's gotta ask the big questions! As we mentioned, this is the series leaping to the PS2 after a decade hiatus in mainline entries, so there's quite a bit of updates bringing this old Super Famicom series into the 3D era. We are still dungeon crawling and exploring an apocalyptic Tokyo, but this time from either a third-person view or various fixed camera perspectives in smaller environments. This, aside from, you know, actual graphics and rooms, makes exploring far more manageable without a map. You'll once again be recruiting and fusing demons to form your own party of 4, which is 2 less than before, so more thought needs to be put into which demons you choose to battle with and which to keep in reserves, and when and how to fuse them to pass down the best moves to your new demons. Demons are just as tenacious as ever, and still have the ability to attack in huge waves one after another, so you've always got to be prepared for the absolute worst case scenario. But if a new or useful demon appears, then you better hope you can convince it to join your ranks with the right dialogue and gifts, assuming your level is even high enough. Because if you fail, then you'll get punished hard with the new press turn system. Like before, each party member gets 1 turn before the enemy's turn. However, with press turns, if you land a critical hit or exploit a weakness, you'll only use up half of a turn, allowing you to wail on your enemies. But if you miss, get blocked, or repelled, you will lose some or all of your remaining turns, which can instantly turn the tide of any battle. The goal is to fight smarter, not harder. It's far more important to exploit extra press turns than it is to focus on simply hitting hard and hoping for the best, especially in long boss battles. But remember, your enemies also follow the press turn structure, meaning if you're weak to their attacks, they will absolutely annihilate you. So not only do you need to plan offensively with your demon skills, but also pay close attention to their weaknesses, because all it takes is one bad matchup and it is game over for you. Because unlike the past games, if the protagonist ever goes down, it's an instant game over. Now luckily you can actually level up your demons this time, and some will straight up evolve into new forms. You can even fuse some with the new Maitama acquired from Rag's returning shop, and these allow you to buff your demon stats, teach them powerful moves, all while retaining their species. Unfortunately for me, I didn't even realize what they did until I was literally standing in front of the final boss. Yeah, so your demons are obviously important, but you've got to power up yourself in order to survive as well, and the way to do that is through the new Magatama, which you like ingest by swallowing or pushing it through your eyeball or something like that. Magatama determine your weaknesses and resistances, what abilities you'll learn through level up, and also provide a flat stat buff while active. And they can also act violently within you when you level up, and allowing them to do so will provide a random effect, like a party-wide heal, a stat increase, or afflict you with a status ailment or a curse. Though they're all different, they are clearly worth hunting down for maximum versatility, especially when you acquire the final Magatama, Masakados. Yeah, Masakados is so broken, but boy does the game make you earn it. Equipping it gives you +10 in everything but luck, null, everything except almighty, and even gives repelling elemental skills upon level up, making the Demi-Fiend nearly impossible to kill. But believe me, it'll still happen as late game bosses love spamming almighty, and getting all those Magatama is by no means easy. Some require defeating hidden bosses, others are expensive purchases, and one in particular requires you to clear 20 levels of a top-down arcade puzzle game in a row without saving. I beat the first 8 actually thinking it was a really fun diversion, but then it just kept going and going, and some got so hard that even with a guide it still took ages to clear them all, but by the power of the internet and more hours I'd like to admit, I got it, and every other Magatama in the game. Yeah, and once we had ultimate power, we went straight back to that puzzle boy twerp and beat his pudgy little face into Campbell's tomato soup. He's just a kid who wanted you to beat his high score. God and Lucifer can wait. This kid's gotta die! Assuming my cursory research of this complex series was adequate, this is the first time the Megami Tensei series got the full 3D cel-shaded graphics effect, outside of the Japanese Xbox exclusive Shin Megami Tensei 9. Wait, 9 came before 3? It's a stupid name, don't think too hard on it. The game canonically happens between the original 2 games, so it's not actually the 9th. Can we talk about Smut 3 now? Glad to hear you're embracing the smut. Well, I'm glad to see the progenitor of tons of new 3D models and animations the series continues to use to this day. The world design itself is a little barren and bland, even for the PS2 though. Yeah, there's almost nothing to see in the game's many dungeons and empty buildings. In the beginning, there's not even cars or people anywhere, like you're already living in some weird Twilight Zone episode or an underdeveloped video game. It really is just a 3D version of the originals with hardly anything to see most of the time, but with even more ridiculous traps. With the beginning being the exception, the world is supposed to feel barren and destroyed, and though it absolutely does, it could have used at least a little more visual variety. And how come when I enter a pitch black cave, I can't see anything when my wicked demonic tattoos should be illuminating the path at least a little bit? They've got a gate progression like Pokemon HM somehow. But I want to glow like Marie Curie in a sensory deprivation tank! You have absolutely no filter, do you? Alright, though this story still gets super intense and philosophical, it's not nearly as unhinged as the first game, unfortunately. You begin as a student in Tokyo, meeting up with 2 of your classmates visiting your teacher in the hospital, when suddenly, the end of the world happens in a catastrophic event called the Conception, folding Tokyo into an inverted sphere, leaving everything outside to be wiped from existence. Hey, I just said it wasn't as unhinged. It's still totally nuts. Paying absolutely no mind that everyone and everything you knew was just suddenly deleted from existence. You and the other few survivors who were inside the hospital at the time of the conception have now become the only humans left alive. Yeah, so this cultist Hikawa and his followers from the Ring of Gaia decided amongst themselves that the world needed to be reborn and instigated this whole event, and your teacher was in on it. Upon awakening in the new Tokyo, you're met with a creepy little boy and an old woman speaking for him, referring to him as her master. Together they grant you demonic strength by forcing you to ingest a Magatama, transforming you into a demon with a human heart known as the Demi-Fiend. We'll later learn that this is Lucifer, and he and this woman are testing our strength like an experiment to return the 11 menorahs to the depths of their twisted, infernal labyrinth of Amala. And they also kind of age backward or something funky, I don't even know, man. You're also joined in this world by one other human, Hijiri, a reporter on the occult who appeared to also survive the conception, investigating the strange terminal drums linking into the Amala network. Though he's helpful at first, Hijiri eventually becomes obsessed with the network and is revealed to be the reincarnation of a man cursed by God to perpetually bear witness to the end of the world over and over again. He apparently did die in the conception, but was forcefully resurrected again due to his curse. And for fans of the series, Hijiri's curse can only describe one person, the only character who managed to directly take the battle to God himself. Aleph, the protagonist of Smut 2. Now, you'll spend most of your time traveling from place to place, fulfilling requests and whatnot to progress, but you'll soon realize that the few characters left alive are becoming less and less insignificant. Though you're the only one of the group to gain demonic powers, they all independently decide that they have the right to recreate the world based on their own ideals. These are called reasons, and instead of having a traditional law and chaos alignment, the Demi-Fiend has to hear everyone out and determine whose reason he personally agrees with to see it through, or undermine and find his own path. Technically, most of the reasons are chaotic in nature, and they boil down to survival of the fittest, individuality, freedom, and complete stillness. Though only humans can create a reason, and the Demi-Fiend has long lost that trait, his insane strength allows him the ability to ensure that his chosen reason will come to be. But you're a demon, and you can reject all of that, and either restore the world to exactly the way it was before, or leave it in this chaotic state ruled by demons until the next conception. The whole way you go about this is by making it to the center of the spherical Tokyo, reaching the bright Kagatsuchi that's glowing like the moon, giving the demons their strength. Turns out that Kagatsuchi is actually an avatar of God himself, and by presenting a reason before Kagatsuchi, you are doing so before the creator. You could do that. Or you could just punch God right in the face! And if you were tenacious enough to restore all 11 menorahs to the Labyrinth of Amala, Lucifer will give you one final test after you literally just kill this facet of God in an intense final boss battle, culminating in the entire universe being sacrificed to you, transforming you into the true demon, where you and Lucifer take on the fight to God directly, leading an enormous demonic army in your wake. Fade to black. The end. Holy crap! What this game lacks in characters and engaging story moments, it more than makes up for in its intensity. I mean, to get those menorahs, you have to straight up hunt down and kill each of the demonic fiends holding them, each representing the apocalypse or death in some fashion. You even cut down the 4 horsemen of the apocalypse along the way, for crying out loud. There's a bit I especially love in the depths of Amala, where the massive Beelzebub challenges you to prove your might to pass, and once you best him, he's like, okay, you may pass, but you just keep on swinging anyway. And he's like, you can stop now. Stop! Jesus, stop, please! And you just keep swatting him like the fly he is. I love that you feel totally weak in gameplay, but in lore you're this unstoppable, unrelenting demon. Now, we're not going to single out any particular religions here, so let's be clear that the Demi-Fiend hates them all equally. Effectively, every angel, demon, cryptid, or mythological character exists in this world, and you get to punch them all. Once again, this series has some incredible music. Also, the HD remaster added some much-needed voice acting that really brings the game to life. Jumping to the PS2 in the early 2000s netted it some hard rock tracks amidst the traditionally updated twang these soundtracks tend to have. The tracks with creepy chanting vocals are especially powerful. What I love about these vocal boss battle tracks is that aside from being atmospheric and setting the stage for these cataclysmic battles determining the fate of creation, they also let us hear directly into the mind of our otherwise silent, stoic protagonist. Man, that's some good stuff. Fortunately for us, we're actually covering an old PS2 game that's been remastered for modern platforms and hasn't been abandoned by its developer! So pick up Smut 3 if you want to give this intense RPG a go. And for the memes, you can even play the game in Maniacs mode, with DLC patching Dante back into the game, replacing the in-universe replacement character Raido Kuzunoa. So your game can once again say it is featuring Dante from the Devil May Cry series. I really appreciate going from the old Super Famicom sprites to recognizing these demons in similar poses in 3D. It's like I got to experience this leap to the modern age, but decades after the fact. But if you think the Demi-Fiend's weak for hanging onto his first ever demon, the Pixie, then you've clearly not descended into the deepest levels of Amala, because once your original companion reawakens as Uber Pixie, that dainty little fairy can put the whole team on her back. Yeah, you end up killing God at the end of a bunch of JRPGs, but in how many do you straight up leave a trail of both the divine and the demonic bodies along the way to literally slay the God for no other reason than you just want to punch him in the face? The positive gamer in me took some warming up to Shin Megami Tensei 3, but eventually reached a 7 out of 10. It's always a good time recruiting and fusing new demons and customizing your ever-evolving party, but this game's sheer difficulty and generally bland world bring it down, but just a smidge. The critical gamer in me finds Shin Megami Tensei 3 to deserve an 8 out of 10. I really appreciate the concept of deciding on a reason for creation over alignments, as it muddies the waters for what players always search for as the best ending in games. But fortunately for me, killing God and becoming the true demon is its own reward. Well, what do you think? Tell us how your positive and critical sides rate Shin Megami Tensei 3 Nocturne HD Remaster in the comments below. Hey, if I could beat it, then so can you. But if you're gonna let this brutally difficult PS2 RPG intimidate you into skipping it, then you're just playing with yourself. Mom, where have you been? It's been almost a month.
I tried. I crashed. No way back. I had no other choice. I had no other choice.
And by the way, Louis just bankrupted the company, so I'm gonna have to send you out on another space excursion for cash right away. No! I've had this old GameCube disc laying around unbeaten for over 20 years and just recently decided enough was enough. The time has finally come to buckle down and beat Pikmin.
So many dead. They're all dead because of me!
Yeah, my first couple tries with this game back then ended in miserable failure, and it left me feeling a little bit discouraged and terrified of giving it another go due to the game's strict 30-day time limit.
I didn't know they couldn't swim! I didn't know!
But this time I prepared myself and optimized my strategy to ensure that Captain Olimar would survive. And I did it!
But at what cost?
Pikmin is a genius retake on tactical strategy games, where instead of controlling and ordering around your pawns like an omnipotent deity, you take control of one tiny, helpless spaceman with a whistle, with up to 100 plant-like minions called Pikmin at a time, eagerly awaiting his orders. You'll need to manage your Pikmin like troops to best optimize your time breaking down barriers, defeating enemies, and carrying cargo back to your ship, because you've only got 30 in-game days to collect enough of your crashed ship parts in order to safely escape the planet before your life support systems go offline and you die. And how long is a day? 24 hours?
Try 15 minutes.
Which actually at first feels like a ton of time to get a few big tasks accomplished, so you naturally get right to it. And then you run into some unexpected roadblocks, get ambushed by enemies, and find yourself scrambling in the final countdown to gather up all of your remaining stray Pikmin, because if you can't, you'll be forced to leave them behind to be eaten alive by the dangerous nocturnal predators of the planet. Pikmin is all about strategizing on the fly. You just brought a bunch of Pikmin to destroy some bramble wall when you discover a ship part that only the blue Pikmin can carry. So you start to divide your forces and figure out how to make do with multiple teams working simultaneously. Each type has their strengths you'll need to manage. Like red Pikmin have the best attack strength and are immune to fire. Yellow Pikmin can carry bomb rocks and are thrown much higher than the others. And lastly, the blue Pikmin have gills to breathe underwater. But the game doesn't outright tell you any of that, and I sure had fun learning this the hard way. Thing is, no matter how hard you try to keep those cute little guys alive, you're gonna lose some to unexpected hazards and enemies. Oh god, and no matter where you are on the map, if Pikmin start dying, you will hear that heartbreaking little death cry, and you've got to quickly figure out where the problem is, get it together, and try to save the remaining Pikmin from the same fate. Because if you don't, you'll potentially have your entire fleet wiped out in mere moments, and might even face a Pikmin extinction. So you gotta get more troops to make fights easier and manual labor faster, and you do this by hauling the defeated enemies and colored pellets back to the Pikmin's weird UFO ships called Onions, where new Pikmin will sprout, allowing you to pluck them and add them to your ranks. On the surface, it's a simple management strategy game, but it is so much deeper than that. Look, you personally pick every single one of these little guys who all unconditionally follow your orders. You don't just feel set back by losing some mechanically, you feel emotionally devastated because it's undeniably your fault that some of your devoted Pikmin are dead. They trusted you and now they're dead. It's all for the same goal of getting Olimar safely off the planet. How many have to die so that you may live? 1,154, or at least that's what it took for me. Probably lost about half of them alone just trying to get my piggy bank back. Emperor Bulblax is no joke.
You monster!
No one alive will know of my crimes. My sins are buried in the Bulblax sand pit. I will never see the light of heaven. Keep in mind that this is an early launch title for the GameCube, and its textures, models, and even water effects are all shockingly well done for the system. I love how cartoonishly goofy this game's whole overall aesthetic is. You're this inch-tall spaceman commanding walking seedling minions to fight colorful buggy-eyed monsters. What I love is how it transforms innocent terrain like a creek bed or your own backyard into an unrecognizably macro-scale alien world for its areas. And the game never says what this alien planet is, but amidst the bizarre predators of the world, you're also going to be occasionally passing some relics of human civilization like discarded bottles and cardboard boxes, implying that PNF 404 is actually Earth post some sort of human extinction event. PNF 404. Planet not found, error 404, come on. Forget that, I have so many questions! Pikmin is such a cute little management game with so many disturbingly dark undertones. What happened here? Captain Olimar is pissing about in his spaceship coyly named the SS Dolphin, the codename for the GameCube, when he is suddenly sidewinded by an asteroid and sent crashing down towards a nearby unknown planet. Upon awakening on the surface, he finds the dolphin in shambles and quickly realizes that if he has any hope of ever seeing his family again, he will have to hunt down and restore all of his lost ship parts before his life support systems fail in 30 days. Nintendo is known for their happy-go-lucky games, and Pikmin tends to give off the same quirky vibe, until you read the logs of Olimar day after day reporting on what has happened to him, and we get a glimpse into his isolation, fear, and responsibility toward the Pikmin companions that he is letting down. Olimar's daily logs will report on whatever you accomplished that day, or what horrors befell you. He'll be joyous at receiving new ship parts, or wallow in shame after the deaths of his companions. He even writes about his wife and children. It's always played off as cute, but keeps reminding you that your mission is crucial, and if you fail, this funny little astronaut man will suffocate and die. Luckily, Olimar quickly discovers, names, and utilizes the local Pikmin to help him accomplish his otherwise impossible task, to try and recover all 30 lost ship parts before his 30-day time limit is up. And we should mention that the areas are all completely open. You'll likely spend a few days without recovering a single part, just exploring, defeating monsters, and opening shortcuts, and others you'll be fortunate enough to bring back more than one to make up for your time loss. And the game doesn't exactly tell you, but you technically don't need all 30 parts to reach escape velocity. If you do reach the 30th day, Captain Olimar will risk liftoff anyway and either crash and burn or barely make it off the planet if you happen to find all of the mandatory parts. But of course, finding them all allows Captain Olimar to achieve liftoff before the time limit, where in a cute goodbye cutscene he awkwardly bids farewell to the Pikmin who saved his life, and after his departure, they turn to a nearby bulb orb and attack it unprovoked, implying that they feel empowered after Olimar's journey and can now fend for themselves without him. There's also dozens of other colored onions that fly into space after Olimar, not only implying that there were tons of other Pikmin types that we just never saw, but that they might just have gotten the confidence to explore and invade other planets. And that's a little comforting. But the bad ending is even more unsettling. After Olimar fails to reach orbit, crashes back down on the planet, and dies, the Pikmin crowd around his dead body and carry him back to their onion, whereupon he is absorbed into it and sprouts out like a seedling himself, reborn as a disturbing Pikmin Hocketation hybrid. The end? God, I don't even want to know what that means. I have even more questions! Just like the rest of the game, the music is really weird, and as you progress areas from the landing site to the final trial, the music changes from optimistic to unnerving, and each area has an alternate version to seamlessly transition to combat and sunset. The cute little voices the Pikmin make give them loads of personality, making it even more gut-wrenching when you watch them all get eaten alive by a giant monster you thought you were ready to face as they cry out in agony. During the actual days, I'm always high-strung and focusing on optimizing my movements, so when the day ends and I get that record screen recapping the day's events, it feels so good just to soak in your accomplishments or reset in despair. While marketing the game, the Japanese group Strawberry Flower created a cute but terribly sad song titled I No Uta, or Song of Love, sung from the Pikmin's perspective. And though I recommend checking it out in its own right, it's important to note that this single ended up outselling the game. What? Even when it's not trying to be, Pikmin never ceases to be bizarre. I have more questions than brain cells at this point. I I was stubborn and insisted on beating my old GameCube disc, but you don't have to be. This game got ported to the Wii with updated motion pointer controls, and recently up-res to the Switch bundled with Pikmin 2. Though it's admittedly hardest on the GameCube, do not miss your chance in playing this old classic modernized. Those pointer controls allow you to cheese the old puzzles and weasel your way around obstacles in unintended ways, so even if you're intimidated by the game's timer, you really can't fail in those new versions. I distinctly recall waking up in high school early to check the Smash Brawl announcement website daily, where one fateful day Captain Olimar was revealed as a playable fighter. I excitedly shared the news with everyone I knew, only to be met with the exact same response every time. Who? Don't be like those clowns and play Pikmin. The positive gamer in me loved Pikmin enough to pluck a flowering 7 out of 10. It really is an emotional rush in good times and in bad, even though this game at times is held back by some awkward controls and tricky puzzles. The critical gamer in me admires the uniqueness of Pikmin enough to scrap together a 9 out of 10. There's nothing quite like this unique, bizarre little game, and it's unfortunately rare that we see such an experimental title succeed this strongly. But what do you think? Let us know how your positive and critical sides rate Pikmin in the comments below. Some of Nintendo's best work is unexpected and weird, but if you'd rather just see them produce the same old formulaic games even after playing Pikmin, then you're just playing with yourself.